Hey friends! Glad you're here at Harryverse X. We've cooked up something special. What if Batman found Harry in the cupboard at age 3 and Wayne Fortune built him magical Batsuit and Kryptonite wand? Liking and subscribing really helps us out. Okay, story time. Chapter 1. The cupboard. The rain had been falling on Surrey for 3 hours by the time Bruce Wayne's car turned off the A3 and into the quiet, suffocating sameness of little whinging. It was the kind of neighborhood that made Bruce's jaw tighten without him quite knowing why. Every house identical. Every lawn trimmed to the same aggressive precision. Every curtain drawn at exactly the same angle, as though the residents had agreed, collectively and without discussion, that the most important thing in life was to look like nothing interesting ever happened here. It was the suburban equivalent of a closed fist. "Alfred," Bruce said quietly, his voice cutting through the hum of the engine, "remind me why we're in Surrey and not at the Langham with the rest of the Wayne Enterprises delegation." Alfred Pennyworth, sitting in the driver's seat with the particular rigid dignity he maintained in all weather and all circumstances, didn't glance back. "Because, sir, Mr. Fox received intelligence suggesting the distribution network for those enchanted counterfeit Wayne Tech components runs through a warehouse on the eastern edge of this borough. And because you insisted on investigating personally rather than delegating to the Metropolitan Police, as any sensible person would have done. The Metropolitan Police don't know what they're looking at when magic is involved. Nor, if I may say so, do you. Not reliably." Bruce didn't argue with that. He'd only been aware that magic was real for 14 months, and the education had been brutal and ongoing. It had started with a break-in at a Wayne Enterprises research facility in Zurich, a theft that left no fingerprints, no security footage anomalies, no physical evidence of entry or exit, and a researcher who remembered nothing but a flash of green light. It had ended, 6 months later, with Bruce crouched in a condemned building in Edinburgh watching a man in robes perform something that rewrote his entire understanding of what the world was made of. He hadn't told anyone except Alfred and Lucius. He was still processing. "Pull over here," he said. Alfred stopped the car on Wisteria Walk, 2 streets over from the warehouse coordinates Fox had flagged. Bruce was already opening the door, already scanning the street with the practiced, rapid assessment of someone who had spent 15 years treating every environment as a potential crime scene. The rain was cold and steady. The streetlights cast everything in amber. He found nothing at the warehouse. Not nothing, there were traces. Scorch marks on the concrete that smelled faintly of sulfur and something else, something that reminded him of the Edinburgh building, that electric copper smell that he'd come to associate with recent magical activity. Whoever had been here recently. Had cleared out recently. The intelligence had been good, the timing had been off. Bruce stood in the empty warehouse for a long moment, listening to the rain drum on the corrugated roof, then turned and walked back out into the night. He was halfway back to the car when he heard it. He almost didn't. It was barely a sound at all, more of a presence at the edge of his hearing, the way a held breath is louder than silence in a quiet room. He'd learned, over the years, to pay attention to those almost sounds. He'd learned that the things people most wanted hidden were the things they kept quietest. He stopped on Privet Drive. Number 4. A perfectly ordinary semi-detached house. A garden gnome that someone had positioned with the smug satisfaction of a man who takes garden gnomes seriously. A car on the drive that was 2 years old and cleaned every weekend without fail, Bruce guessed, based on the state of the tires. Everything about this house said normal, said nothing to see, said move along. The almost sound came from inside. Bruce stood on the pavement and looked at the house for 4 seconds. Then he walked up the garden path. He didn't knock on the front door. He went around the side, past a recycling bin and a coiled garden hose, to the small window on the ground floor beside the front stairs. He crouched down. The window was barely larger than a mail slot, set into the wall at floor level, fitted with a latch that had been, he squinted, padlocked from the outside. There was a padlock on a window. Bruce's jaw went very still. He looked through the glass. The inside of the cupboard under the stairs was dark. He couldn't see much, a water pipe, the underside of a stair tread, a faint shape on what appeared to be a thin mattress that was barely a mattress at all, more a suggestion of padding over bare floorboards. The shape was small. The shape was a child. Bruce Wayne had seen a lot of things in his life. He'd seen crime scenes and battle damage and the particular wreckage that human beings leave when they decide other human beings don't matter. He'd built an entire second identity out of the decision that he was not going to look away from those things anymore. He took the padlock off in 11 seconds. He'd had it in his jacket pocket before he registered consciously that he'd decided to do this. The cupboard door swung open. The child inside flinched so hard he woke himself up, a full-body startle, limbs jerking, and then a complete freeze, the kind of stillness that isn't calm but is the opposite of calm, the stillness of an animal that has learned that movement draws attention. He was pressed back against the far wall of the cupboard, which wasn't far at all, maybe 3 feet. He was staring at Bruce with eyes that were green. Vividly, unusually green, even in the darkness, as though the color was lit from somewhere behind the iris. He was tiny. 3 years old, maybe. Maybe not quite. He had a cut above his left eyebrow that had been left to heal on its own. He had bruising on his forearms that was several days old and yellowing at the edges. He was wearing a shirt that was 4 sizes too large and trousers that had been rolled at the cuffs so many times the roll had become a permanent feature. He was not wearing shoes. He didn't make a sound. He just watched Bruce with those impossible green eyes and waited to see what happened next. Bruce Wayne, who had faced the Joker, who had broken up a weapons smuggling ring in Minsk with 3 cracked ribs, who had once dangled a mob enforcer off a parking garage and felt nothing but cold tactical satisfaction, felt something in his chest crack open like old ice. "Hey," he said, and his voice came out lower and gentler than he'd intended, the voice he didn't use professionally, the one he mostly only used with Alfred. "I'm not going to hurt you." The boy didn't move. "What's your name?" Bruce asked. A long pause. Then, barely audible, "Harry." "Harry." Bruce kept himself very still, very unthreatening, crouched at the entrance to the cupboard so he wasn't looming. "Harry, my name is Bruce. Can I come in there with you for a second?" Another pause. Then, slowly, incrementally, Harry uncurled slightly from the wall. It wasn't a yes. But it wasn't a no either. Bruce moved slowly, sitting cross-legged at the edge of the cupboard space, not pressing closer. He looked around at the walls. There were crayon drawings on the wood, small and careful, a stick figure that might be a person, something that might be a star, something that might be a bird. There was a small toy soldier with a broken rifle lying on the mattress, the only toy Bruce could see. "Do you live here?" Bruce asked. "Yes," Harry said. Then, with the cautious precision of a child who has learned to be very careful about what constitutes an acceptable answer, "Sometimes I'm allowed in the kitchen." "Sometimes." "Allowed. Where are the people who take care of you?" Bruce asked. "Asleep," Harry said. "Aunt Petunia goes to sleep at 10. Uncle Vernon goes to sleep at 10:30, but he snores so you can tell." He stated this with complete factual confidence, the way children state facts they've had to learn for survival. "Dudley goes to sleep whenever." "How long have you been in here tonight?" Harry looked at the door of the cupboard, then at Bruce, then at his own hands. "Since after dinner," he said. "I spilled. Something happened under the staircase in number 4, Privet Drive that Bruce would think about for years afterward. Something happened when he looked at this small, bruised, careful child who had been locked in a cupboard for spilling something, who padded facts about his aunt and uncle's sleeping schedules in his memory the way other children padded their pockets with treasures. Something happened that Bruce Wayne, who had spent 15 years carefully and successfully not letting anything new get in past the grief and the armor and the mission, he let it in. He didn't examine it. He didn't analyze it. He just felt it, clean and sudden and irrevocable, like a key turning. "Harry," he said, "would you like to come with me?" Harry looked at him for a long, solemn moment. "Where?" "Somewhere better," Bruce said. Somewhere with a real bed. And food whenever you want it. Another long look. Children that age weren't supposed to be this careful. They weren't supposed to weigh things this precisely. But Harry's green eyes moved over Bruce's face like a scanner, reading something, checking something. Are you a good person? Harry asked. The directness of it landed somewhere unexpected. Bruce was quiet for a moment, genuinely thinking about it, because the question deserved that. I try to be, he said. I don't always manage it. But I try very hard. Harry thought about this. He picked up the toy soldier and held it against his chest. Okay, he said. I'll come. Bruce carried him out of the cupboard, through the garden, back to the car, and Harry didn't make a sound. He sat in Bruce's arms with one hand gripping Bruce's jacket lapel and his face turned slightly outward, watching the neighborhood recede through the rain-streaked window as Alfred pulled away, and Bruce felt the small fingers tighten once on his jacket and didn't say anything about it. Alfred, Bruce said quietly. I've already called ahead to the London townhouse, Alfred said. Dr. Kellerman will meet us there within the hour. She's discreet and she's thorough. Good. A pause. He'll need food, Alfred said. Something simple. Something warm. I know. Alfred said nothing else for a long moment. Then, very quietly, he has his mother's eyes. Bruce looked at him sharply. The Potters, Alfred said, in a tone that suggested he'd been waiting for the right moment to say this and had decided this was it. Lily and James Potter. They died just under 2 years ago. Their home was destroyed. It was reported as a gas explosion. The boy was found in the rubble unharmed. He paused. I've known since February who he was. I was waiting for you to find him. Bruce stared at the back of Alfred's head. You were waiting for me to find him. You were going to eventually, Alfred said serenely. You always find the things that need finding. I merely ensured we had the documentation prepared in advance. Alfred. The adoption paperwork is in the glove compartment, sir. Harry, sitting in the curve of Bruce's arm, had fallen asleep. His grip on Bruce's jacket had not loosened. Bruce looked down at him for a long moment, at the cut above his eyebrow and the bruising on his small arms and the way he'd curled himself into the warmth like it was something he wasn't sure he was allowed to keep. He reached into the glove compartment and took out the paperwork. Harry Wayne grew up in 3 places simultaneously, Wayne Manor, the London townhouse, and a mental landscape that Bruce spent years carefully constructing for him, layer by layer, until it was as fortified and functional as the Batcave itself. He was a remarkably easy child to love and a remarkably challenging child to raise, and Bruce discovered these 2 facts in quick succession. Easy to love because Harry had an innate quality that Bruce would struggle to name for years, a gravitational warmth, an uncanny ability to pay attention to people in a way that made them feel truly seen, a humor that was dry and quick and came out of nowhere and made Alfred laugh until his eyes watered. Challenging to raise because Harry had the investigative instincts of someone twice his age, the stubbornness of a mountain, and magic that operated completely independently of anyone's wishes including his own. The magic started making itself aggressively known about 3 months after Harry arrived at the manor. The first incident was small. Bruce found Harry in the kitchen at 2 in the morning, sitting on the counter eating crackers, the high cabinet he'd never been able to reach standing open above him with no explanation. Harry looked at Bruce. Bruce looked at Harry. Bruce looked at the cabinet. Were you hungry? Bruce asked. Yes, Harry said. You should have come to get me or Alfred. Harry ate a cracker and considered this. It was the middle of the night, he said. You were probably doing something. I was sleeping. Oh. Harry appeared to file this information. So you sleep. Occasionally, Bruce said. What happened to the cabinet? Harry looked at it. I needed it to be open, he said simply. The second incident was harder to minimize. Harry was 4, playing with a set of wooden blocks in the manor library, and Bruce was nearby at the desk reviewing contracts, or trying to, because Harry's block structures had been getting increasingly ambitious and Bruce kept looking up, when Harry placed a block in a position that defied gravity, balanced at an angle that wasn't physically supportable, and it stayed there. It just stayed there. And then the entire structure, some 30 blocks high and architecturally impossible, floated 2 inches off the library floor while Harry watched it with the focused, slightly surprised expression of someone who isn't sure if they meant to do that. Bruce put down his pen very carefully. "Harry." "I know," Harry said, in a tone that suggested this was not the first time he'd done this privately. "How long has this been happening?" Harry thought about it seriously. "I don't know. I think it was happening at the old place too. I used to make the light come on in the cupboard sometimes." He said this without particular emotion, the way he talked about Privet Drive when he talked about it at all, factually, carefully, with no more weight in his voice than he chose to put there. "It stopped working after a while. I think I got tired." Bruce came and sat cross-legged on the library floor beside the floating block structure, the way he'd sat at the entrance to that cupboard, and looked at his son. He'd started thinking of Harry as his son around month 2 and had stopped arguing with himself about the nomenclature around month 4, and thought very carefully about what to say. "I need you to understand something," he said. "What you can do, this is extraordinary. And I'm going to make sure you understand it and control it and use it well. But I need you to trust me while we figure it out. Can you do that?" Harry brought the block structure back down to the floor, gently, and looked at Bruce. "Are you scared of it?" he asked. "No," Bruce said, and meant it completely. Harry nodded, satisfied. "Okay then," he said, and went back to building. Lucius Fox took the footage from the Manor's security cameras. Bruce had sent it to him within the day, and disappeared into his lab for 72 hours. He emerged with 40 pages of notes, a hypothesis about magical fields and electromagnetic interference that he admitted was almost entirely speculative, and an expression Bruce had only seen on Lucius's face a handful of times, the expression of a man who has just discovered that the universe is significantly more interesting than he thought. "We need to learn everything we can," Lucius said. "Everything. Because whatever this boy is, Bruce, he's going to need tools we don't have yet." "Then we build them," Bruce said. "Obviously," Lucius said, with the tone of a man who had already begun. Alfred meanwhile took on the role that suited him best and that no training or job description could have prepared him for, the role of the person who made sure Harry knew he was loved in the daily, ordinary, non-tactical ways. He taught Harry to cook simple things, standing at the kitchen counter with Harry on a step stool beside him, the two of them making soup or shortbread with the seriousness of a research project and the warmth of something much older. He read to Harry every night for 4 years, every genre, every age level, choosing books with the curatorial instincts of a man who understood that what you feed a mind matters enormously. He took Harry to museums and parks and cricket matches and once, memorably, to a West End performance of Phantom of the Opera that Harry decided was the greatest thing ever created by human beings, a verdict he maintained for approximately 3 weeks before revising it in favor of a Wayne Enterprises robotics demonstration. He also, quietly and consistently, pushed back when Bruce's training instincts went too far. The argument happened when Harry was 6. Bruce had started teaching him basic hand-to-hand, nothing serious, just balance and positioning and how to fall correctly, and Harry had taken to it with an enthusiasm that was partly genuine interest and partly, Bruce suspected, the thrill of having something that was unambiguously his and his father's together. But that particular evening Bruce had pushed the session an hour over what he'd planned, and Harry was tired, and 7-year-old children who are tired do not necessarily admit they are tired, they just get increasingly reckless. Harry had thrown himself at a training dummy with more energy than technique, bounced off it badly, and hit the mat hard enough to knock his breath out. He'd been fine, completely fine, up in 20 seconds, but Alfred, who had brought down a tray of sandwiches and had watched the last 10 minutes of the session from the doorway, had spoken. "Bruce." Just the one word, and the tone. Bruce turned. Alfred set the tray down. "Come here and eat," Alfred said to Harry, who came immediately because Alfred's voice at that register meant food and comfort and no argument. Later, when Harry was in bed, Alfred had stood in the doorway of Bruce's study and said, "He is 6 years old. He needs to be prepared, he needs to be a child," Alfred said, with the particular precision of someone choosing each word like a tool. "He needs, Bruce, for at least part of every day, to simply be a boy who is safe and loved and not being sharpened into anything. Do you understand me?" Bruce was quiet for a moment. "I'm trying to protect him." "I know," Alfred said. "So am I. We're protecting him from different things. Both of the things are real." It was the truest thing Alfred had ever said to him, and Bruce didn't answer it because there was no answer to give. He just nodded, and changed the training schedule, and started leaving more of the evenings unstructured, and tried, genuinely tried, not to see every one of Harry's minutes as an opportunity to make him more prepared for a world that was going to be difficult. The magic, meanwhile, didn't wait for anyone's preparation. Harry's control improved naturally and in surges, the way all children's physical abilities improved, in long stretches of plateau and then sudden leaps. By age 7 he could move objects reliably, could produce light from his hands, had once accidentally set the Manor's east wing fountain going in reverse direction for 6 hours without knowing he'd done it. He'd also discovered that his magic responded to his emotional state in ways that could be startling. When he was angry, electronics glitched and lights flickered. When he was very happy, small things floated. When he was frightened, which was rarely, and became more rarely as he grew, every window in the nearest room fogged over from the inside. Bruce documented all of it. Cross-referenced it. Shared it with Lucius in encrypted reports. Built a database of Harry's magical signatures, reactions, and patterns that Lucius used to begin the first serious work on what would eventually become the suit. And Bruce taught Harry to read everything. Every room, every person, every situation. He taught him to notice what people wore versus what they said, to read the gap between body language and spoken words, to understand that most people communicated their real intentions through the things they tried to hide. He taught him chess at 5, at a level of seriousness that had Harry challenging Alfred to marathon games by 6 and beating him by 7. He taught him basic cryptography, basic forensics, the principles of structural analysis, how to read a floor plan. Harry absorbed all of it with a quicksilver intelligence that sometimes stopped Bruce cold. Because it wasn't just retention, Harry could synthesize. He'd take 3 unconnected things he'd learn and connect them in ways Bruce hadn't anticipated, and he'd present these connections with a matter-of-fact confidence that was occasionally unnerving and frequently delightful. "Dad," Harry said one morning at breakfast when he was 8, looking up from a book on electrical engineering. He'd been calling Bruce Dad since about age 5, having started with Bruce and transitioned through a phase of calling him Batman. Alfred had handled the fallout from the discovery of the Batcave with remarkable composure, and arrived at Dad as a settled conclusion. "Dad, I think the reason my magic messes up electronics is because it creates a localized field disruption in the same frequency range as a lot of our hardware. Like a very small targeted EMP." Bruce, who had been reading the Financial Times, put it down. "Walk me through that." Harry walked him through it with a broken pencil on a napkin, drawing frequency diagrams from memory, annotating them with observations from his own magic that were simultaneously empirically recorded and experientially understood. He was right. He was largely right. Lucius would later confirm he was 80% right, which in Lucius's rating system was essentially equivalent to correct. Bruce had looked at this 8-year-old explaining the electromagnetic properties of his own magic with a half-eaten piece of toast in his other hand and thought, James Potter was supposed to have been extraordinarily gifted. Lily Potter's intelligence had apparently been something exceptional enough that people still talked about it years after her death. And those 2 people had produced this remarkable, strange, brilliant boy who was sitting in Bruce Wayne's kitchen explaining physics to him with toast in his hand. "Good analysis," Bruce said. Harry grinned, which was a different thing from his ordinary expression, wider and more unguarded. "Lucius is going to have ideas about it." "Lucius is going to have 17 ideas about it and they'll all try to talk over each other," Bruce agreed, and reached over and stole Harry's toast, and Harry made an outraged noise and stole it back, and for a moment there was nothing in the kitchen except an ordinary morning and two people who belonged to each other. Alfred's books laid the groundwork, but it was the manor itself, its library specifically, that gave Harry his first real window into the world he'd come from. He was 9 when he found the Wizarding History section. Alfred had assembled it deliberately, over 2 years, through a combination of discreet acquisitions from magical antiquarians that Lucius had identified through his research and, Bruce suspected, through Alfred's own connections, which were more extensive and more eccentric than anyone fully knew. The section was 7 shelves, tucked in the east wing of the library between a run of Victorian natural history texts and a complete collection of first-edition Sherlock Holmes. If you didn't know to look, you wouldn't look. Harry, who looked at everything, found it on a rainy Sunday afternoon and didn't come out of the library until 9 at night. He read Hogwarts, a history first, then a beginner's guide to Transfiguration, then a crumbling volume called Great Wizarding Events of the 20th Century that covered, among other things, a dark wizard called Voldemort who had risen and fallen in the early 1980s and whose defeat was attributed, in a single dry paragraph, to a toddler named Harry Potter who had somehow survived the killing curse in the village of Godric's Hollow. Harry came to find Bruce in the Batcave, which was where Bruce spent most evenings after patrol. He carried the book. He set it on the console in front of Bruce, opened to the relevant page, and waited. Bruce had been expecting this conversation for 2 years. He'd prepared for it. He'd had drafts of it in his head, different versions for different emotional registers, because he'd learned that Harry's reactions to difficult information were not always predictable, not because he was volatile but because he was perceptive, and sometimes the thing that landed hardest wasn't the thing you expected. "I know," Bruce said. "You've always known," Harry said. Not accusing. Just making sure. "Yes. My parents were a witch and a wizard." "Yes." Harry looked at the page, then at Bruce. "Am I in danger?" It was a remarkable question from a 9-year-old. It was also exactly the right question. "I don't know," Bruce said honestly. "Voldemort is believed to be destroyed. But I've learned not to put absolute confidence in believed to be destroyed." "Good policy," Harry agreed. He pulled up a stool and sat down, which meant he was settling in for a real conversation, not just an information exchange. "Tell me everything you know." So Bruce told him everything. He talked for an hour, and Harry listened without interrupting, asking 2 clarifying questions that were both excellent, and when Bruce was finished Harry sat quietly for a moment with his chin in his hand and his eyes doing that thing they did when he was processing, rapid and inward. "So there's an entire society," Harry said, "of magical people, who live alongside Muggle society but parallel to it, who have their own government and their own history and their own school system, and they think my death of a Dark Lord is basically a miracle performed by a baby. That's a reasonable summary, yes. And they have no idea how I've been raised. No. And they're going to eventually come looking for me. Almost certainly. Presumably when you turn 11. Bruce paused. Hogwarts sends letters to magical children before their first year. Harry nodded, thinking. Then he looked sideways at Bruce with an expression that was partly calculating and partly something warmer. "Are you worried? About you going into that world?" Bruce considered being diplomatic, decided against it. "Yes. Because you don't know enough about it yet?" "Because I don't know enough about it yet," Bruce confirmed. "And because they have certain assumptions about who you are and what your role is supposed to be that I don't think will survive contact with reality." Harry's mouth curved slightly. "Reality being me." "Reality being you," Bruce agreed. They sat together in the blue-white light of the Batcave's consoles, the two of them and the sound of the cave and the distant suggestion of Gotham beyond the cliff, and Harry turned the history book over in his hands once and set it down. "I want to learn about it," he said. "All of it. Everything you and Lucius have found out. I want to know my own history." "I know. I've been building a curriculum." "I know you've been building a curriculum," Harry said, with the mild affection of someone who has long since accepted certain inevitabilities about their parent. "I want to add to it." He tapped the book. "Can Lucius get more of these?" "He can get more of these," Bruce said. "He's already started." Harry nodded. Then he slid off the stool and stood up, and he was 9 and small for 9, and he had his mother's eyes and his father's jawline and Bruce Wayne's certainty about the world stamped all over him in a way that had developed gradually and quietly over 6 years into something so fundamental it was just the shape of him now. "Thanks for telling me," Harry said. "I know that was a conversation you'd been planning for a while." "What gave it away?" Harry gave him a look. "You had 3 versions of the opening sentence ready. I could tell by the way you paused before you started." Bruce stared at him. "You're 9. 9.5, Harry said, and walked back up the cave stairs with the Hogwarts history tucked under his arm. The years between 9 and 11 were the productive years. Not that the earlier years hadn't been productive, but these 2 years had a specific focused energy, a building toward quality, as all 3 of them, Bruce, Lucius, and Harry himself, began working toward the same understood destination. Lucius had been working on the suit concept since Harry was 5. It had evolved substantially in 6 years, partly because Lucius's understanding of magical physics had grown, partly because Wayne Tech itself had grown, and partly because Harry kept outpacing the design specs. The breakthrough had come 18 months before Harry's 11th birthday, when Lucius, through a contact in the Ministry of Magic's Department of Mysteries that Bruce had spent 2 years cultivating, had gotten his hands on a sample of something that the contact had described, with bureaucratic blandness, as a volatile magical mineral of extraterrestrial origin that exhibits disruptive properties toward both magical and certain enhanced biological fields. Lucius had called Bruce at 11 at night when he'd finished preliminary analysis. "Bruce," he said, with no preamble, because at 11 at night Lucius had run out of patience for preamble, "if I told you that this material interferes with, destabilizes, and in sufficient doses completely nullifies all known forms of magical energy, including, based on current data, unforgivable curse effects, what would you want to do with it?" Bruce hadn't hesitated. "I'd want to build a wand." A brief silence. "I was thinking the same thing," Lucius said. "I'll need 6 months and an Ollivander." "You'll have 4 months and Ollivander's published notes." "Can you work with that?" "I can work with anything," Lucius said, and hung up. The suit took longer. The suit was an engineering project of extraordinary complexity, because it had to function in 2 worlds simultaneously. It had to be tactically sound in the Muggle sense, protective in the magical sense, and compatible with Harry's own magic rather than interfering with it. Lucius had developed a rune-threading technique, working with a consultant in magical textiles who asked no questions in exchange for enough money to retire comfortably, that wove protective enchantments directly into the fabric at the structural level. The result was something that looked, in its final form, unmistakably like a Batsuit, because Harry had asked for that specifically, had sat with Lucius and walked him through exactly what he wanted, had made it clear that he was going to Hogwarts as himself, completely and without apology. "You're sure about the bat symbol?" Lucius had asked, genuinely curious. Harry looked at him. He was 10 at the time, and the look he gave Lucius was the look of a boy who had grown up watching his father's approach to intimidation and had developed a profound respect for it. "The bat is about fear," Harry said. "About using the dark instead of hiding from it. I'm going into a world that tried to pigeonhole me before I was born. I want to make sure they understand from the first moment that I'm not what they expected." Lucius had written this down. Not for the engineering notes. Just because it seemed worth keeping. The wand, when Lucius finished it, was unlike any wand that had ever existed. Harry had handled it for the first time in Lucius's lab, and every instrument in the lab had gone haywire simultaneously, needles spinning, readout spiking, one extremely expensive mass spectrometer simply shutting down as though it needed a moment, and Harry had stood there holding it and feeling, by his own later description, like holding a live wire that had decided to be on your side. "It disrupts magic," Lucius told him. "External magic, hostile magic, controlling magic. Anything directed at you will be degraded, disrupted, or reflected, depending on the intensity. But your own magic, conducted through it, is amplified. The kryptonite acts as a lens. Why do you call it kryptonite? Harry asked. Lucius smiled, and it was the smile of a man who has a good story. Because a long time ago, Superman stories were just comic books, he said. And then I found out that magic was real. I decided to keep an open mind about everything after that. Harry weighed the wand in his hand. It was dark, almost black, with a faint green luminescence at the core that you could only see in certain lights, a pulse of it, slow and regular. It feels like mine, he said. It is yours, Lucius said. I built it for you specifically. It won't work for anyone else. The rune binding is keyed to your magical signature. He paused. It also, for what it's worth, matches your eyes. Harry looked at the wand. Lucius was right, the green was exactly the green of Harry's eyes, that deep impossible emerald that Bruce had once told him was the most distinctive thing about him, because nothing that green should look that sharp. One more thing, Lucius said. I need to show you something I found in the process. Something about the kryptonite and your specific magical signature that I don't entirely have a theory for yet. He pulled up a readout, graphs and waveforms, and Harry leaned in, because data was the same language in both worlds and Harry spoke it fluently. When your magic interacts with the kryptonite core, there's a secondary field generated. It's not protective, exactly. It's more like a frequency. A specific frequency that interferes with a very narrow band of magical effects. The effects in that band are possession, mind control, compulsion, and magical domination. Harry was quiet, looking at the readout. Basically, Lucius said carefully, while you're holding this wand, no one can take over your mind. No one can compel you. No one can possess you. You will always be yourself. Harry stood with the wand in his hand for a long moment. Lucius, he said. Yes. This is the best thing anyone has ever made for me. Lucius, who had known a great deal of satisfaction in a long career of extraordinary engineering, found himself somewhat moved by this. He cleared his throat. Don't thank me. Thank the universe for inventing a mineral that does all of that. I'm thanking the person who figured out what to do with it, Harry said simply, and the conversation was closed. The letter arrived on a Tuesday in late July, delivered not by post but by an owl, which perched on the kitchen windowsill with the regal expectation of an ambassador presenting credentials. Harry was in the kitchen already, eating cereal, and he watched the owl arrive with the calm attention of someone who has been told this was coming and has been looking forward to it. He took the letter. He read it once. He put it down beside his cereal bowl. Alfred, who had come in with fresh orange juice, stood very still. Well, Harry said, it's real. He said it with a quality that wasn't surprise but was something, acknowledgement, maybe. The satisfaction of a hypothesis confirmed. He picked up the letter and read it a second time, more carefully. Then he picked up his phone and called his father. The letter came, he said, when Bruce picked up. A pause on the other end. I know, Bruce said. There are 17 owls on the manor roof. Harry looked at the ceiling. He really wanted to make sure I got it. Apparently. Another pause. How do you feel? Harry thought about this seriously. Ready, he said. I feel ready. Bruce was quiet for a moment, and in the quiet Harry could hear something that Bruce didn't say but that was there anyway, in the texture of the silence, something that was pride and worry and love all running together in a frequency that Harry had learned, over 11 years, to recognize as distinctly his father's. Good, Bruce said finally. Come down to the cave when you get home. We need to go over the equipment review with Lucius. Already looking forward to it, Harry said. He hung up and went back to his cereal. The owl watched him with yellow eyes. After a moment Harry broke off a piece of toast and held it out, and the owl, apparently deciding this was acceptable, took it with great dignity and departed. Alfred set down the orange juice and stood looking at Harry, at this boy who had arrived at their door in a borrowed shirt and a broken sleep, who was now sitting at the Wayne Manor kitchen table at 11 years old with a Hogwarts acceptance letter beside his bowl and the confidence of someone who has been well and truly prepared for whatever comes next. "Harry," Alfred said. "Yes." "Whatever happens," Alfred said, "I want you to know that watching you grow up has been the honor of my life." Harry looked up from his cereal and his face did something open and uncomplicated, something the training and the tactics and the sharpening hadn't touched, and he said, "Alfred, you're going to make me emotional before breakfast." "Good," Alfred said primly. "You need more emotional moments before breakfast. You're entirely too tactical at this hour." Harry laughed, and the kitchen filled with it, and somewhere on the roof of Wayne Manor 17 owls waited with the patience of creatures who understood that the important letters always eventually found their mark. Chapter 2, The Arsenal. Diagon Alley smelled like candle wax, old parchment, and something underneath both of those things that Harry couldn't name, something alive and electric, like the air before a storm decides what it's going to do. He stood at the entrance to the leaky cauldron and breathed it in for 3 seconds, cataloguing it the way Bruce had taught him to catalogue everything, and then he walked forward. Bruce was beside him. Alfred had wanted to come. Bruce had suggested, gently, that Alfred's reaction to the moving paintings might be more than the paintings were prepared for. Alfred had sent them off with packed sandwiches and a look that communicated, without words, that he expected a full debrief. Lucius had come instead, which was its own kind of event. Lucius Fox in Diagon Alley was a man in full command of his own astonishment. He looked at everything with the bright, contained intensity of someone running rapid calculations, his engineer's mind cataloging and cross-referencing in real time. He'd insisted on coming himself to see the final wand presentation, to watch Harry handle the finished Kryptonite wand in its actual operational context for the first time. The wand was currently in a custom-built case in the inner pocket of Lucius's jacket, rune-sealed and waiting. The leaky cauldron's interior was dim and warm and populated by people in robes, some drinking, some eating, one man in the corner apparently having an argument with his own hat. Harry took it in without breaking stride. Tom, the barman, leaned on the counter and watched them come through with the squinting appraisal of a man who had seen a great deal of unusual things walk through his door and was quietly tallying this new entry. "You'll want the alley," Tom said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Harry said. Tom looked at him for a moment with those sharp, old eyes. Then something shifted in his expression, recognition, uncertainty, the particular look of a man who has just noticed something he wasn't expecting. He looked at Harry's forehead, where the scar was mostly covered by his hair, and then back at his eyes, and then he said nothing, which was more respectful than most reactions Harry would receive today. "Straight through to the back," Tom said. "Brick wall. 3 up, 2 across." Harry knew. He'd read about it. He'd read everything available. But he let Tom tell him anyway, because letting people be helpful when they wanted to be cost nothing and built goodwill, and goodwill was intelligence that paid ongoing dividends. Bruce had taught him that. The brick wall opened with a grinding, theatrical reluctance that Harry found immediately charming, and Diagon Alley unfolded in front of them like something from the library books come to life, the crooked buildings leaning toward each other overhead, the shop signs moving, a cart rattling past carrying what appeared to be a cage of something that kept changing color, witches and wizards in robes of every shade moving along the cobblestones with the comfortable purposefulness of people who belong completely to the place they're standing in. Harry walked into it. He moved the way Bruce had taught him to move in unfamiliar territory, forward, present, scanning without making the scanning obvious. Eyes up, not down. Peripheral awareness engaged. Looking for exits, yes, but also looking for patterns, for the texture of the place, for the way people moved and what that said about the social architecture. What it said was interesting. There were people who moved through the alley with ownership, older, mostly, well-robed, with the unconscious confidence of those who have never considered the possibility that a space might not belong to them. There were people who moved through it with a different confidence, a cheerful belonging, families with children who knew where the good sweet shops were. And there were people who moved through it carefully, smaller, more watchful, people who knew this world had rankings and knew roughly where they stood. Harry filed all of it and kept walking. "You're doing the thing," Bruce said quietly beside him. "The reading the room thing? You get a specific expression." "What expression?" "Alfred calls it your chess face," Bruce said. "He means it affectionately." "I'm always affectionately playing chess," Harry said, and Bruce made a sound that was as close to a laugh as he got in operational mode, which was what Bruce called it when they were out together in any context that might become complicated. He'd been in operational mode since the leaky cauldron. Gringotts was first, because Bruce had decided that the financial picture needed to be established before anything else, and Harry agreed with the reasoning. The white building stood at the end of the alley like a statement of principle. "This is where the power lies," the architecture said, "this is what permanence looks like, come and conduct your business with appropriate gravity." The goblin at the entrance looked at them with the expression of someone who has evaluated many people and found most of them wanting. Harry met the look directly, without challenge and without deference, and the goblin, perhaps slightly wrong-footed by this, stepped aside. Inside, the bank was high-ceilinged and echoing and smelled of gold and stone. More goblins worked at the long counter with the focused efficiency of people who genuinely enjoy arithmetic. Harry walked to the nearest available window and waited. The goblin who came to the counter looked at him and said, with no preamble, "Vault key." "I don't have it with me," Harry said. "My name is Harry Potter. I understand there is a family vault. I'd like to discuss the logistics of accessing it and establishing additional account structures." The goblin looked at him for a long moment. Then it looked at Bruce. Then back at Harry. Identification. Harry produced the documentation that Alfred had compiled, birth certificate, Ministry of Magic records, and a notarized letter from a goblin liaison firm in the City of London that Lucius had engaged 6 months earlier. He placed them on the counter with the unhurried confidence of someone who has prepared correctly and knows it. The goblin examined the documents with minute attention, and Harry watched it examine them, and Bruce stood slightly behind and to the right, and Lucius stood beside him, and the bank continued its business around them. "Grip grip," the goblin said finally, without turning around, and a second goblin materialized from somewhere behind the counter. A rapid exchange in gobbledygook followed. Harry caught one word, or thought he did, but the goblins were fast and he'd only had 6 months of the language from a text that Alfred had sourced, which was not enough. The first goblin turned back. "The Potter Vault and the Black Trust Vault are available to you," it said. The Black Trust activated on the date of Sirius Black's incarceration. "As the named beneficiary, there's a Black Vault?" Harry asked. "Trust Vault. Named beneficiary, Harry James Potter. Activated in abeyance pending your majority or legal guardian claim." The goblin looked at Bruce. "You are the legal guardian?" "Adopted guardian," Bruce said. "The documentation, we have seen the documentation," the goblin said, in a tone that suggested the documentation was acceptable but only barely, and primarily because the goblin's own records confirmed it. "The trust vault remains in abeyance until the beneficiary's 17th year. The Potter Vault is immediately accessible." A pause. "There is also a research vault registered to Lily Potter, née Evans, containing materials related to experimental magical work. Its contents have never been catalogued." Harry kept his expression neutral. "We'd like access to all three, when the terms permit. Today, just the Potter Vault." The goblin looked at him steadily. "You are not what we expected," it said. "I get that a lot," Harry said. "Shall we proceed?" The Potter Vault was considerable. Harry stood in the doorway and looked at the gold and didn't feel what he might have expected to feel, because he'd never really thought in terms of money. He'd grown up with Wayne money, which was a different scale entirely, and money had always been to him a resource rather than a goal, a tool you used rather than a thing you wanted. What the vault represented was history, his parents' history, their accumulated life, compressed into coin and object and paper. He looked at it for a moment with that understanding and then turned back to the goblin guide. "I'd like a full accounting sent to this address," he said, handing over a card that had the London townhouse address. In writing, itemized. And I want to discuss investment restructuring when we next visit. He paused. Are there goblin-managed investment instruments? The Goblin Guide, who had been carrying itself with the expression of someone expecting a wide-eyed child and getting something else entirely, produced what might charitably be called a smile. There are, it said. Not discussed with wizards as a rule. I'm not really a rule follower, Harry said pleasantly. Let's discuss it on the next visit. They came back up to the alley with a bag of gold that Harry handed to Bruce to manage. You're better at carrying things without looking like you're carrying things, and moved on. Madame Malkin's for robes, which took 40 minutes because Madame Malkin was thorough and had opinions about hemlines. Harry submitted to the process with good grace and used the time to read the current copy of the Daily Prophet that was lying on the waiting room chair, which told him a great deal about the wizarding world's current concerns, a ministry reshuffling, ongoing debate about Muggle relations policy, and a small article on the back page about increased sightings of unusual magical disturbances in northern Scotland that the reporter treated with studied vagueness. He read the vague article twice. Northern Scotland. Unusual magical disturbances. He filed it. The bookshop was efficient. Harry had a list, he'd compiled it himself, cross-referencing the Hogwarts supply list with Lucius's research into which foundational texts were actually useful versus which were curriculum filler. He navigated flourish and blots with the focused speed of someone who had been in much larger libraries and knew exactly what he was looking for, collected everything in 11 minutes, and added 3 books that weren't on any list, a comprehensive text on warding theory, a historical analysis of magical law, and a densely footnoted tome on the theoretical properties of magical cores that he'd been trying to source for 8 months. Bruce watched him work the bookshop and said nothing, but Harry could feel his approval in the peripheral way he always could, a slight relaxation around the shoulders, the way Bruce's scan of the environment went from tactical to merely observational. They collected the other supplies without incident. The cauldron shop smelled aggressively of copper. The apothecary smelled worse and was fascinating. Harry spent 7 minutes examining the properties on the ingredient labels before Bruce herded him out. They bought an owl at the magical menagerie because Harry had decided he wanted one, and the owl he chose was a small screech owl that had been sitting at the back of the cage looking at everything with magnificent contempt. Harry pointed at it and it looked back at him with an expression of mutual recognition. That one, Harry said. That one is not the most sociable, the shopkeeper began. That one, Harry repeated, pleasantly. He named the owl Oracle, which Alfred said later was very on brand. Then they went to Ollivander's, and that was something else entirely. The shop was narrow and dusty and had the smell of cedar and age and something Harry now recognized as the specific magical atmospheric smell he'd been cataloging all day, concentrated here into something almost visible. Thousands of wand boxes stacked from floor to ceiling in a grid that went further back than the shop should have been able to accommodate, which meant it was larger inside than outside, which was the kind of architectural decision Harry found philosophically interesting. Garrick Ollivander emerged from between the stacks like something the shop had generated of its own accord, small and white-haired and with those silver eyes that seemed to be looking at a layer of you that wasn't quite the layer facing outward. He stopped when he saw Harry, and the stop was total, a complete cessation of movement, as though the data he was receiving required all available processing power. Harry Potter, Ollivander said. Harry Wayne, usually, Harry said. But yes. Ollivander's silver eyes moved to his forehead, then back to his face, then, and this was the interesting part, to his hands. Wand makers looked at hands the way Bruce looked at crime scenes, Harry guessed. Looking for what the evidence said about the person. You'll need to try several, Ollivander said, reaching for a measuring tape that immediately began measuring Harry's hand span, arm length, and several other dimensions apparently of interest. The wand chooses the wizard, you understand. It is not a transaction, it is actually, Lucius said, stepping forward, we've brought a wand for assessment. Ollivander turned and looked at Lucius Fox for the first time, and the look managed to be simultaneously surprised, offended, professionally curious, and deeply alarmed. I beg your pardon. Lucius produced the case from his jacket pocket. He set it on the counter and opened it. The wand was there, resting in the custom foam, dark wood with the faint green pulse at its core. Even in the dim shop, it had a presence, a quality of readiness, of coiled potential, like a circuit waiting to be closed. Ollivander stared at it. He leaned forward, then back. He clasped his hands together. He said nothing for 11 seconds, which was a very long silence in a small shop. "What," he said finally, "is the core?" "A mineral of extraterrestrial origin," Lucius said. "With properties we've documented extensively. I can provide the research." "Extraterrestrial," Ollivander repeated. He looked at the wand as though it had said something unexpected. "And the wood?" "Blackthorn," Lucius said. "Specifically selected for its properties under duress." "Blackthorn is a warrior's wood," Ollivander murmured, almost to himself. He looked at Harry. "May I?" "You can look," Harry said. "Don't touch it." Ollivander blinked. Then he looked at Harry with something that might have been respect and might have been recognition. "It won't work for me anyway, will it?" he said. It wasn't quite a question. "It's keyed," Harry said simply. Ollivander leaned very close to the wand without touching it, examining the core pulse, the grain of the wood, the subtle runic threading that Lucius had worked into the binding. His silver eyes moved over it like a man reading a text in a language he mostly knew. "The rune work," he said. "This is not standard wandcraft." "No," Lucius agreed. "It is extraordinary wandcraft," Ollivander said, "and there was no concession in it, just precision, the professional assessment of a master craftsman encountering genuine peer work from an unexpected direction." He straightened up and looked at Lucius with new attention. "You made this?" "I did." "You're a muggle," Ollivander said, and again it wasn't accusatory, it was the specific wonderment of a man updating his model of the world. "I'm an engineer," Lucius said. Ollivander looked at the wand again for a long moment. Then he looked at Harry. "Pick it up," he said. "Let me see." Harry reached into the case and took the wand, and every instrument in the shop went haywire at once. The measuring tape shot backward off its reel, 3 wand boxes on the nearest shelf flew open spontaneously, and the single candle burning on the counter flared to 4 times its height and then steadied. The light in the shop changed quality, the ambient light that came from nowhere in particular brightening slightly as though responding to a rheostatic increase. Harry held the wand and it felt like it always felt, like a live current that had chosen to be on his side. Like holding something that knew him. Ollivander watched with his silver eyes and said nothing for a long time. "Give me your other hand," he said finally. Harry extended his left hand, and Ollivander produced, from somewhere in his robes, a small instrument that he held near Harry's palm without touching, a sort of modified compass that was spinning rapidly. He watched it spin, then looked at the wand, then at the compass again. "The field disruption is significant," he said. "I've never seen a wand that produces a disruption field as a baseline function." He lowered the compass. "You understand what this means, in practice?" "I understand it precisely," Harry said. "If someone tries to use legilimency on you, disrupted. An imperious curse, disrupted. Any form of compulsion or possession, disrupted," Harry said patiently. "We've tested it extensively. Lucius has the data if you want to review it." Ollivander looked at him. "You've tested it." "My father is thorough," Harry said. "We don't deploy equipment in the field without testing it." There was a silence in which Ollivander appeared to be recalibrating something significant. He looked at Lucius, who stood with the case and the steady self-possession of someone very comfortable with being the most competent person in a room. "The rune threading," Ollivander said finally. "The wand's enhancement of the user's own magic, what did you use as the theoretical basis?" "My own analysis of how magical field generation interacts with electromagnetic frequencies," Lucius said, "combined with historical texts on rune amplification theory and approximately 14 months of trial and error." 14 months, Ollivander repeated. "I had a deadline," Lucius said simply. Ollivander looked at the wand one last time. Then he looked at Harry, really looked at him, in the way the very old look at the very young when they are seeing something they did not expect to see, something that rearranges their sense of what comes next. I have been making wands for over 200 years, Ollivander said. I have made 11,419 of them. Every wand I have ever made, I can tell you its properties, its limitations, what it will do well and what it will struggle against. He paused. I cannot tell you any of those things about this one. I don't know its limitations. I'm not sure it has any that I could identify. Another pause, longer. That is either the most promising thing I've heard in years or the most alarming thing I've heard in years, and I find I cannot decide which. Both, probably, Harry said. He set the wand back in the case, and the shop's instrument settled, and the light returned to its normal quality. Can you certify it with the ministry? As what? Ollivander asked. I don't have a category for it. Make one, Harry suggested. You seem like someone who's done that before. Ollivander was quiet. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed, a short, dry sound, like a book falling from a shelf. I have, he said. On 3 occasions. None of them ended quietly. He reached under the counter and produced a certification ledger. I'll register it as an artisan construct. Custom work of extraordinary classification. He dipped his pen. Full name. Harry James Wayne, Harry said. Ollivander wrote it. He looked at it on the page, and Harry noticed that Ollivander's hand had stilled slightly, resting beside the entry, as though the name on the page was doing something to him, as though the not Potter of it landed somewhere complicated for a man who had sold James Potter his wand and Lily Potter hers and who had watched what those 2 wands last wielders had wrought. Your parents' wands, Ollivander said quietly, not looking up from the ledger. James had mahogany. 11 inches. Pliable. Good for transfiguration. Your mother had willow. 10 1/4. Swishy. Excellent for charms. He looked up. They were remarkable people. Harry met his eyes. I know, he said. I intend to be remarkable too. Different kind of remarkable. I don't doubt it, Ollivander said, and closed the ledger. They stopped at a cafe on Diagon Alley's northern edge, a small place that served tea and pastries and seemed used to customers who needed a moment to collect themselves after the sensory experience of the alley. Harry ate a scone and drank tea and let the morning's data settle while Bruce and Lucius talked quietly over the Gringotts documents. He was watching the people in the alley through the cafe window. Watching how they moved, who deferred to whom, how the social topography expressed itself in small daily transactions. He'd been building a map of this world for 2 years in his head, historical, political, sociological, and now the map had texture and color and the weight of real people in it. There's something I want to talk about, Harry said. Bruce and Lucius both looked at him. Voldemort, Harry said. Neither of them flinched. This was one of the things Harry valued most about these 2 specific men, they engaged with the uncomfortable directly, without flinching or deflecting or suggesting that perhaps the topic could wait for a better time. What about him? Bruce asked. He's not gone, Harry said. I know the official position is, believed destroyed. I know the wizarding community has largely accepted that because it's easier than the alternative. But the evidence doesn't support it. A curse that should have killed me reflected off me and apparently dissolved the caster's body but not the caster himself. Bodies can be reconstituted. Power can survive corporeal destruction if it's anchored. He paused. I've been reading about Horcruxes. A silence. Where did you find that? Lucius asked. The research vault Gringotts mentioned is my mother's. I've been corresponding with the goblins. They've been forwarding me catalogs. Harry stirred his tea. She was researching soul magic. Specifically the consequences of soul division. She didn't complete the research, she died before she could, but her notes are extensive and they kept coming back to Voldemort as a case study. I think she figured out what he did. Or was close to it. Bruce was very still, the way he got still when something important was happening. How many? He asked. The texts on Horcruxes are restricted, so I'm working from inference and my mother's secondary references. But if I had to estimate based on behavioral patterns and the extreme measures he took to consolidate power. Harry set down his teacup. More than one. Multiple. Possibly many. Lucius and Bruce exchanged a look. It was a look Harry recognized, the look of two people who have been preparing for a version of a problem and have just been handed a larger version of that problem and are recalculating. It changes the operational picture, Harry said. He can't be permanently destroyed until they're all found and dealt with. Which means our timeline is open. He will come back. The question isn't if, it's when, and in what form, and what he wants with me specifically. He looked at Bruce. He made me his anchor. The prophecy, the curse, whatever magical mechanics connected us that night, I'm part of his story whether I want to be or not. I've decided to be part of it on my terms. What does that mean? Bruce asked, with the careful tone of a father trying to determine whether his 11-year-old has just made a sound tactical decision or a reckless one. It means I go to Hogwarts, Harry said, I learn everything I can learn, I make allies, I build intelligence networks, and I don't wait to be found. I find. He picked up his scone. He's going to underestimate what I am because of what he expects me to be. That's a gap. We exploit gaps. Lucius made a small sound that might have been admiration. Bruce was still looking at him with that careful expression. Harry, Bruce said. I know, Harry said. I'm 11. I know what that sounds like. But I've had 11 years of learning how to think about problems like this, and I'm telling you what the problem is. The execution plan can develop over time. I'm not going to charge in. He paused. Unless charging in is tactically optimal. In which case I will absolutely charge in. Bruce looked at him for a long moment. Then he picked up his own tea. Tell me about your mother's notes, he said. Everything. So Harry told him. He talked for 40 minutes, because the notes had been extensive and Harry's recall was thorough, and Lucius took out a small notepad and wrote things down and asked 3 clarifying questions and Bruce listened with his chest face on and the afternoon light moved through the cafe window and the alley went about its business outside. None of it knowing or caring that 3 people at a corner table were quietly assembling the framework for a war they intended to win. The Hogwarts Express left from King's Cross Station at 11 o'clock on the 1st of September, from platform 9 3/4, which was accessible through a barrier between platforms 9 and 10 that you had to walk through with conviction. Harry had read about this. He walked through it without hesitating. The train was gleaming and red and producing enough steam to suggest it had opinions about the weather. The platform was crowded with families saying goodbye, owls in cages adding their voices to the general noise, trunks being levitated and dropped and argued about. Harry stood with his trunk, custom-built, Wayne tech reinforced, with a concealed compartment for the suit that was both rune-locked and biometrically sealed, and took in the scene with that particular quality of attention that was never quite neutral. Alfred had come to see him off. Bruce had come to see him off and was standing with the deliberate stillness of a man trying not to do anything that could be classified as hovering. Lucius had sent a message with Oracle that morning that said, in its entirety, the suit is calibrated. The wand is ready. So are you. LF, right, Harry said, turning to them. Alfred straightened his tie with the focused attention of a man who needs to do something with his hands. You have everything. I have everything. The emergency contact protocol, Oracle goes to the London townhouse. You or Bruce respond within the hour. I know. The suit compartment, biometrically sealed, rune-locked, keyed to my magical signature. Nobody else can open it. I know, Alfred. Alfred looked at him, and Harry looked back, and they were standing in King's Cross Station with the Hogwarts Express building pressure beside them and the magical world going about its loud, warm, extraordinary business around them. I'm going to be fine, Harry said, and he meant it in the specific way that he always meant things, not as reassurance but as statement of fact. I know, Alfred said, and there was something in his voice that was fond and sad and proud all at once in a way that Harry chose not to examine too closely at present, because he had a train to catch. That's not what I'm going to miss. Harry grabbed him briefly, one arm around his shoulders, the hug of a boy who had learned early that physical affection was something to be given without ceremony when it was warranted. I'll write, he said. Frequently. With embarrassing levels of detail. Promise me. Promise. He shook Lucius's hand, and Lucius held it for a moment and said, any problems with the wand, any new properties, any unexpected behaviors, document them and send them to me immediately, which was Lucius's version of I love you and please be careful. Then he turned to Bruce. Bruce looked at him. 11 years of mornings and evenings and training sessions and library discussions and quiet companionable silences in the Batcave and chess games and rooftop patrols in Gotham when Harry was old enough to come and the specific unrepeatable texture of a life lived together, all of it in that look, both of them knowing it and neither of them being the kind of people who made that kind of thing explicit at King's Cross Station. You've prepared thoroughly, Bruce said. I learned from the best, Harry said. Don't take unnecessary risks. Dad. Or do, Bruce amended, but make sure you've evaluated them first. Always do, Harry said. Then, because he was 11 and this was real and he was standing at a threshold in the most literal sense, I'll be home for Christmas. Bruce put a hand briefly on his shoulder. It was the Wayne version of a long embrace. I know, he said. Go. Harry went. He grabbed the handle of his trunk and walked up the platform, and he didn't look back, not because he wasn't feeling it, but because looking back suggested you weren't sure about forward, and he was completely sure about forward. He found an empty compartment near the middle of the train, stowed his trunk, settled Oracle's cage on the rack, and sat down by the window. Oracle looked at him with magnificent contempt. The platform outside was still bustling, families still saying goodbye, and Harry could see Bruce and Alfred and Lucius standing together at a slight remove from the crowd, Bruce with his arms crossed, Lucius with his notepad still in his hand, Alfred standing perfectly straight. The train began to move. Harry watched them through the window until the steam obscured them, and then he turned away and faced the compartment, and the forward direction, and everything that was coming. The compartment door slid open 20 minutes out of London. The boy who put his head in was red-haired and freckled, with the look of someone who has been moving along the train trying compartments and finding them all occupied or unwelcoming. He looked at Harry, took in the empty compartment, and said, everywhere else is full. Can I sit here? Yes, Harry said. The boy hauled in a trunk that had a crack along one side and a Chudley Cannon sticker on the top, deposited a rat in a cage on the rack beside Oracle, and dropped into the seat opposite. His robes were slightly too short. He had ink on his left hand. He looked at Harry with the direct, uncomplicated curiosity of someone who hadn't learned yet to make his curiosity polite. I'm Ron, he said. Ron Weasley. Harry Wayne, Harry said. Ron's eyebrows went up. Wayne. Like, Wayne Enterprises Wayne. Yes. Blimey. Ron processed this for a moment. I've got 6 brothers and sisters, he offered, apparently as a counterweight. Well, 5 brothers and a sister. George and Fred are twins. Ginny's my younger sister. Percy's head boy material, which he'll remind you about if you let him. He said this with the cheerful resignation of someone who has long since made peace with this fact. You've got no one, have you? I mean, it's just you. Just me, Harry agreed. That sounds brilliant, Ron said, with complete sincerity. I mean, don't get me wrong, family's good, but the bathroom situation at our house is, he shook his head. Are you muggle-raised? Mostly, Harry said. My guardian is a muggle. I've known about the magical world for 2 years. I've been studying it. Studying it, Ron repeated, with the tone of someone who associates studying with compulsion rather than curiosity. I like knowing things, Harry said. Ron looked at him for a moment. He seemed to be running a rapid assessment that was less precise than Harry's but not unintelligent, the quick social read of someone who has grown up in a large family and learned early to figure out what kind of person they were dealing with. "What's in the cage?" Ron asked, pointing at Oracle. "Screech Owl. Name's Oracle." Harry looked at Ron's rat. "Yours?" "Scabbers," Ron said. "He's rubbish, honestly. He's been in the family for years. Just sits there." He looked at Scabbers with the mild affection of someone who has given up expecting anything and has found peace in low expectations. Harry looked at Scabbers. The rat was asleep on the floor of its cage, an unremarkable gray, and Harry looked at it for exactly as long as he needed to, which was about 3 seconds, and then he filed something in the back of his mind that he couldn't have explained yet, just a note, just a flag, the way Bruce had taught him to flag things that didn't quite fit the expected pattern without immediately drawing conclusions. The compartment door opened again, and this time it was a girl with bushy brown hair and the air of someone who has already identified the nature of today's mission and is executing it efficiently. She looked at both of them with sharp, dark eyes. "Have either of you seen a toad?" she said. "A boy named Neville has lost his. I'm helping him look." "No toad," Ron said. "No toad," Harry confirmed. She seemed about to leave, then looked at Harry more carefully. "You're reading Advanced Magical Theory," she said, with the tone of someone who has just identified a species they weren't expecting in this habitat. "That's not on the first-year list." "I know," Harry said. "It's fifth-year material." "I know," Harry said again, pleasantly. She stepped fully into the compartment, apparently deciding the toad search could pause for this. "I'm Hermione Granger. I've read all the set books, all of them, and I've read A History of Magic twice and Magical Theory once but not the advanced version." "What's your reading speed?" "Fast," Harry said. "How fast?" "About 900 words a minute with full retention," Harry said, which was true and the result of 3 years of deliberate training. Hermione stared at him. Then she sat down, apparently unconsciously, next to Ron, and looked at Harry with an expression that was simultaneously envious and analytical. "How do you train for that?" "My guardian made me flashcard sets for every chapter and then timed my recall," Harry said. "And before you ask, yes, it was excessive." He'd agree. He's an excessive person. It's one of his better qualities. Ron was watching this exchange with the expression of someone watching a tennis match between two players who are both inexplicably playing at the professional level. "I'm Ron," he told Hermione. "Hermione," she said without looking away from Harry. "Your guardian is a muggle?" "Yes." "And he built you memory training flashcard sets?" "Yes." "And you're reading fifth-year magical theory on the train to your first year?" "Yes." Hermione processed this in the rapid, visible way that people with very fast minds process things. You could almost see the filing happening. Then she said, "That's brilliant, actually," in a tone that made it clear she found it both genuinely impressive and slightly personally challenging, and that both of those things were fine. Harry smiled. It was the real one, the unguarded one. "Thanks," he said. "What have you found most interesting in the theory text so far?" Hermione's face did something that Harry would see many times again, a kind of lighting up, a complete activation of genuine enthusiasm, like someone who has been waiting for a specific conversational door to open. She launched into an analysis of transfiguration theory with the focused velocity of someone who has been thinking about it for weeks without anyone willing to hear it at the required level. Harry tracked with her, asked questions, pushed back on 2 points where he thought her analysis was sound but incomplete, conceded 1 point when she came back at him with better evidence. Ron produced sandwiches at some point, his mother had packed an extraordinary quantity of food, and the 3 of them ate and argued about magic theory while Oracle looked on with contempt and Scabbers slept and the English countryside scrolled past the windows and the Hogwarts Express took them north. Neville Longbottom found his toad himself, eventually, and knocked on their compartment door to tell Hermione so, and looked at Harry with a round, earnest face and the eyes of someone who expected the world to be more complicated than advertised. Harry liked him immediately. He had the quality of genuine steadiness, not confidence, not bravado, but something more durable than either of those. "Sit down," Harry said. "We've got sandwiches." Neville looked at the sandwiches, at the three of them, at the fact of being invited into a compartment where everyone seemed to know what they were doing, which was clearly not a state Neville had expected for himself on this particular train journey. "All right," he said, with the surprised acceptance of someone unaccustomed to luck. He sat down. He ate a sandwich. He listened to the conversation and offered one observation about herbology, specifically about magical plants that had historically been misclassified by wizarding taxonomists, that stopped the conversation entirely because it was both correct and something none of the other three had known. "That's actually, wait," Hermione said, pulling out a notebook. "Where did you read that?" "My grandmother's library," Neville said, slightly alarmed by the attention. "She has some old texts." "I want those texts," Harry said. "Oh," Neville said, surprised again. "Yes, all right." By the time the train pulled into Hogsmeade Station, the four of them had been talking for 4 hours, and Harry had decided that whatever else happened at Hogwarts, he had at least made a start on the most important thing Bruce had told him before he left, which wasn't about studying or tactics or staying alert, but was said quietly on the way to King's Cross that morning while Alfred was loading the trunk into the car. "Find people you can trust," Bruce had said. "Not people who are impressed by you. Not people who need something from you. People who'll tell you when you're wrong. Those are rare. When you find them, keep them." Harry had a feeling he'd just found some of them. The boats across the lake were cold and wonderful, the castle ahead impossibly large, its towers lit against a sky so thick with stars it seemed like excess. Harry sat in his boat with Ron beside him and Hermione across and the lake moving black and still beneath them, and he looked at Hogwarts and let himself feel it, the sheer fact of it, the reality of it, the weight of his own history and his parents' history running up through the castle walls toward him like a current. He was here. He was really here. "All right?" Ron asked, because Ron had the uncanny emotional perceptiveness of someone who has learned to read 6 siblings at close range. "Yes," Harry said. "Just thinking." "About what?" Harry looked at the castle. "About what comes next," he said. Ron looked at it too. "Sorting," he said knowledgeably. "Fred and George told me it involves a painful test of some kind, but I'm 80% certain they were lying." "They were lying," Hermione said with certainty, from across the boat. "How do you know?" "Because the traditional sorting ceremony is documented in Hogwarts, a history. It involves a hat." "A hat," Ron repeated. "A hat," Hermione confirmed. Ron looked at Harry, who was still looking at the castle. "A hat doesn't sound so bad," Ron said. "It really doesn't," Harry agreed, and the boats touched the shore, and they walked up to the doors, and Hogwarts opened to receive them. Chapter 3, The Sorting Hat sat on a 3-legged stool at the front of the Great Hall and looked, as far as a hat could look, like it had been waiting for this specific evening for a very long time. Harry stood in the cluster of first years and watched it. The Great Hall was everything the books had promised, for long house tables, the staff table at the front, a ceiling that wasn't a ceiling but the sky itself given interior form, currently showing a cloud-scattered night dusted with stars. The candles floated. The ghosts drifted. 400 students watched the new intake with the comfortable condescension of those who have already been through the thing you're about to go through. Harry catalogued the room in his first 30 seconds. Exits, 4, including the main doors. Staff table, 13 seats, 11 occupied. Notable absentees, none that he could identify yet. Notable presences, Professor Dumbledore at the center, exactly as described, tall, silver-bearded, half-moon spectacles, an authority that expressed itself as warmth rather than force, which Harry found both impressive and worth examining. A smaller man beside Dumbledore with a turban wrapped around his head, sitting slightly angled away from his colleagues in the specific posture of someone uncomfortable in their own body. 2 seats down, a man with greasy black hair and the expression of someone who has already decided this evening is beneath him, Snape, undoubtedly. He filed the turban man and moved on. Professor McGonagall unrolled a scroll and began calling names. The first years shuffled forward one by one. Harry watched each sorting with genuine interest, not for the drama but for the data, how quickly the hat called each house, what it said about the speed of compatibility, whether the student seemed surprised by the result. Granger, Hermione. Hermione walked up with the contained energy of someone who has been wanting to know the answer to a question for months. The hat barely touched her head before shouting, Gryffindor. The Gryffindor table erupted. Hermione beamed in the specific way of a person who has gotten the result they hoped for and can now fully express the hope they were previously hiding. Longbottom, Neville. Neville walked up with his toad clutched to his chest. The hat sat on his head for almost 2 full minutes. Harry watched Neville's face during this, the anxiety, the waiting, the moment somewhere in the middle when something seemed to shift, something internal, some conversation conducted silently between the hat and the boy. Then, Gryffindor. Neville looked surprised, then looked like he was deciding to believe the surprise was a good thing. Malfoy, Draco. The blond boy who walked up had been standing at the front of the first-year cluster with the self-possession of someone who has been told their whole life that they belong at the front of things. He sat on the stool and the hat hadn't even settled on his head before it called, Slytherin, the fastest sorting of the evening, and Draco Malfoy walked to the Slytherin table with a satisfaction that was entirely unapologetic. He had looked at Harry once, earlier, at the entrance to the castle. Harry had been standing with Ron and Hermione and Neville, talking about the lake crossing, and Malfoy had walked over with the particular gait of someone who expects their approach to matter. He'd looked at Harry and then looked at Ron with a very specific expression, the expression of someone using a social cue as a territorial marker. You really shouldn't be seen with Weasleys, he'd said to Harry, in a voice pitched to Carrie. Or that girl. Or, he'd glanced at Neville, whatever this is. Harry had looked at him without expression for a moment. Interesting opening, he said. Lead with social hierarchy as a control mechanism. Classic approach. Doesn't work on me, but you couldn't know that yet. He turned back to his conversation. Malfoy had gone very still in the way of someone who has deployed a weapon and watched it fail to fire. Do you know who my father is, Lucius Malfoy? Harry said, still not turning around. Former alleged Death Eater. Currently attempting to rehabilitate the family name through ministry donations while maintaining useful alliances with the people who'd most like to reverse that rehabilitation. Married to Narcissa Black. Significant holdings in Nocturne Alley property, which he manages through 3 separate holding companies. He did turn around now, and looked at Draco with the calm attention of someone who has done the homework. I know exactly who your father is. He's someone I'll probably need to deal with at some point. Do you want to try the introduction again with something more useful? Draco Malfoy had stared at him. Then he'd walked away, very precisely, in the direction of somewhere else. Ron had looked at Harry with undisguised delight. How did you know all that? I read, Harry said. That's not in any of our books, not in our school books, Harry agreed. I have other books. Now, watching Malfoy settle smugly at the Slytherin table, Harry considered him as a variable. Draco was intelligent, not as quick as Hermione, but sharper than he performed, and the performance was worth noting. He performed as someone who didn't need to try. People who performed as though they didn't need to try were almost always trying very hard at something else. What Malfoy was trying hard at, Harry would determine in time. Potter, Wayne, Harry. McGonagall checked her scroll and then looked up, and Harry noticed the precise moment when she located him in the crowd, a slight stillness, a recalibration, the professional composure of a woman who has been teaching for decades and has nonetheless just encountered something that required a second look. He walked to the stool. He sat down. He watched the hall watching him. 400 faces, some curious, some indifferent, and a scattered few, the older Gryffindors, some Slytherins, who had clearly been told to watch for him, who had the particular attention of people operating on briefing rather than instinct. He noted them and let the hat fall over his eyes. Darkness. Then a voice. "Well," the hat said. "This is different." "Is it?" Harry thought back, because Bruce had briefed him on the sorting hat and Harry had decided in advance that he would engage with it directly rather than waiting to be engaged. It felt more respectful. Also more efficient. "Most first years," the hat said, "come to me as open books. Whatever bravado they carry, the mind underneath it is readable. You are not readable. You are annotated. My father liked to say that an unexamined mind is a security liability," Harry said. "Your father," the hat said, with something like wonder. "A muggle. I've sorted 17,411 students in 4 centuries. I've never sorted the ward of the Batman. Then this is new for both of us." The hat was quiet for a moment. Harry could feel it, not as an intrusion, more like the sensation of someone else reading a page you're already reading. The hat didn't take, it looked, and what it looked at was the whole architecture of him, the training and the grief and the love and the mission and the years in the library and the years on the rooftop and the thing he'd felt in the Gringotts vault standing among his parents' gold and the thing he'd felt in the boat crossing the lake, all of it. "You do well in Slytherin," the hat said. "The ambition is real. The strategic intelligence is extraordinary. The willingness to use information as power, Salazar would have wanted you." "Slytherin produced Voldemort," Harry said. "I'd rather not validate that particular recruitment pipeline." "It also produced people who defied him," the hat said. "Not all Slytherins are what you're thinking." "I know that," Harry said. "But I'm not going to Slytherin." A pause. "You're telling me where you're going?" "I'm telling you where I belong," Harry said. "There's courage in Gryffindor, but that's not why. There's intelligence in Ravenclaw, but that's not it either." He thought for a moment, precise and honest. "My father built his whole life around something he believes in. Protecting people who can't protect themselves. Running toward the dark. He's never asked to be thanked for it. He's never expected it to be safe. That's not courage exactly, it's something that looks like courage from the outside and feels like necessity from the inside." A pause. "I understand that necessity. I want to be where people who feel that necessity go." The hat was quiet for a longer moment than it had been quiet for anyone else tonight. "Gryffindor isn't just bravery," it said. "You understand that? It's the willingness to lose things for what you believe in." "I know," Harry said. "I've been losing things since I was 3 years old." Another long pause. Then the hat said, in a tone that was something like reverence, "Yes. I think you have." And then, aloud, in the great hall, "Gryffindor." The Gryffindor table erupted. Harry took the hat off, handed it back to McGonagall, and walked to the table, and the noise around him was warm and real and he let himself feel it, the first genuine communal welcome he'd received from the magical world, unmediated, for him rather than for the boy who lived. Though he noticed, as he sat down, that at least half the table was staring at his forehead. He let his hair fall slightly forward and reached for the nearest bowl of bread. Ron arrived moments later, Gryffindor, before the hat had finished settling, and dropped into the seat beside Harry with the relief of someone who has cleared a hurdle they were worried about. "Thank God," he said with feeling. "Fred and George said I might get Hufflepuff, which would have been, not bad, exactly, but the debriefs would have been miserable." "Debriefs?" Harry asked. "Family dinners," Ron said. "We're all Gryffindor. Mum would have been fine about it, actually, she's decent. But Fred and George would have, well." He made a gesture that conveyed years of siblinghood. Hermione appeared on Harry's other side, and Neville across from them, and then the food arrived, and for a while conversation yielded to the more immediate business of an extraordinary amount of food appearing from nowhere, which Harry observed was delightful in practice even if the mechanism was something he'd already read about. He ate and talked and let the evening move at its own pace, and only part of his attention was anywhere other than here, at this table, with these people, in this place. The other part was watching the staff table. Professor Quirrell, specifically. The turban man. The one who'd been sitting wrong in his body, at an angle from himself, carrying his own presence with the particular discomfort of someone wearing something ill-fitting. Harry had flagged it in the first 30 seconds and kept returning to it, not because any single data point was alarming but because the accumulation was, the body posture, the way Quirrell's eyes moved, reactive rather than proactive, always slightly delayed, the smell, very faint. Harry was close enough at one point in the corridor to catch it, sulfur and something else, something like the scorch marks in the Surrey warehouse. He ate his roast chicken and stored it. Snape looked at him once during dinner. Just once, direct and assessing, and Harry looked back with the neutral attention of someone who neither seeks conflict nor avoids it, and Snape's gaze shifted away first, which told Harry something, and what it told him he filed alongside the Quirrell note. Dumbledore's speech after dinner was brief, warm, and contained one specific warning delivered in a deceptively gentle register. The third-floor corridor on the right-hand side is out of bounds to all who do not wish to die a very painful death. Harry paused with a piece of treacle tart halfway to his mouth. He set it back down. He pulled out the small notebook he kept in his inside robe pocket. Bruce had given it to him. Bruce also kept a notebook, this was not a coincidence, and wrote, "Third floor. Right side." "What's there?" Ron looked at the notebook. "Are you taking notes during the headmaster's speech?" "Yes," Harry said. "Why?" "Because he just gave us operational intelligence in the middle of a welcome address," Harry said. "Which means he wants us to know there's something there without officially telling us there's something there." Ron blinked. "Or he just wants us to stay away from it." "Also a possibility," Harry allowed. "But a man like Dumbledore who wanted us to stay away from something would say, stay away from this and not, this will cause your painful death." The second phrasing is an invitation to the curious. Maybe he doesn't want curious people there. "A school is entirely composed of curious people," Harry said. "If he's been running one for this long, he knows that." Ron looked at him with an expression that was becoming familiar, the expression of someone who finds Harry's reasoning both uncomfortable and compelling, like a chair that's slightly too straight but is definitely better for your posture. "You're going to be exhausting," Ron said, but not unkindly. "Probably," Harry agreed, and went back to his treacle tart. Classes started the next morning and Harry moved through them with the methodical efficiency of someone who has spent 2 years pre-studying the curriculum and is now interested primarily in the gap between what the book said and what the practice revealed. Charms with Professor Flitwick was genuinely enjoyable. Flitwick was small, enthusiastic, and had the pedagogical gift of making foundational theory feel like discovery rather than recitation. Harry liked him immediately. The wand movement for Wingardium Leviosa was explained with careful clarity, the class attempted it with varying success, and Harry got the feather on the first try, not because he'd practiced it exactly, but because his control of magical intent through the wand had been something he'd been developing for 2 years with the Kryptonite wand, and the mechanics translated. Flitwick noticed. He said nothing during class, but he caught Harry's eye and gave him the smallest of nods, the nod of one professional acknowledging another. Transfiguration was Professor McGonagall, who transformed her desk into a pig and back before any student had found their seat, which Harry appreciated as an opening statement. She was direct, exacting, and had precisely zero patience for unpreparedness, which Harry found thoroughly reasonable. She called on him twice in the first lesson, clearly testing the scope of his preparation, and both times he answered completely, and she looked at him afterward with an expression that was complicated, something that was satisfaction at a prepared student and something else underneath it, something that was almost grief, the way people looked at Harry sometimes when they recognized James's jawline or Lily's eyes in his face. History of Magic was Professor Binns, who was a ghost, who lectured in a monotone that seemed designed to extract consciousness from the listener through sheer sustained blandness. Harry took notes anyway. Ron fell asleep within 8 minutes. Even Hermione's pen slowed toward the end. Harry found Binns's content interesting, not because of the delivery but because underneath the soporific presentation was a substantial amount of useful political and magical history that cross-referenced things from his mother's notes in interesting ways. He noted 4 specific connections and underlined them. Potions was last on Thursday, and Harry had been looking forward to it for reasons that had nothing to do with the subject matter. The dungeons were cool and smelled of things that would cost him his health if he breathed them for extended periods, which explains certain complexities of long-term potions mastery. Harry sat at the bench with Ron on his left and noted that the classroom had been designed, consciously or not, for maximum dramatic effect: the low ceiling, the dim light, the shelves of preserved specimens in jars along the walls. He appreciated the staging. Snape entered the way he always apparently entered, billowing, deliberate, filling the room from the doorway outward. He called the register with the particular precision of someone using routine as a test, watching faces, calibrating responses. "Potter," he said, and then, "Wayne, rather." "Either works," Harry said pleasantly. Snape looked at him. It was a specific look, the look of someone who has prepared a particular approach to a particular person and is recalibrating because the person isn't where they expected to find them. Harry had read about Snape. He'd read about him carefully, because the man was relevant, not just as a professor but as a piece of the larger picture, a former Death Eater who had defected, who carried guilt about Harry's mother in ways that had reportedly shaped his entire subsequent life. Complex, brilliant, and possibly an ally if handled correctly. "What," Snape said, addressing the class but looking at Harry, "would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood?" A pause. Most of the class looked uncertain. Hermione's hand went up. Harry didn't raise his hand, not because he didn't know but because he was watching Snape and he wanted to see where this was going. "I don't know, sir," said the class, in various nonverbal ways. "Potter," Snape said. "Since Mr. Wayne insists both names are applicable. Where would I look if I wanted to find a bezoar?" "Stomach of a goat," Harry said. Snape's eyes narrowed slightly. "And what is the difference between monkshood and wolfsbane?" "There isn't one," Harry said. "They're the same plant. Also known as aconite." He paused. "The infusion of wormwood and asphodel would produce the draught of living death. And a bezoar will save you from most poisons, which is probably the more useful fact to establish in a room full of first years who are about to work with volatile substances." He met Snape's gaze. "I read the required texts. And the recommended supplementary texts. And a few that weren't on either list." A silence in the dungeon classroom that had a particular quality to it, the silence of a room waiting to see how a confrontation resolves. Snape looked at him for a long moment. Harry looked back, and what was in his look was not defiance and not submission, it was something more precise than either, something that said, "I see you clearly. I'm not afraid of you. I'm not performing for you. And I think, if you're honest with yourself, you know that what I just said was useful rather than insolent." 5 points to Gryffindor, Snape said. It came out like a coin placed on a table rather than a gift bestowed, precise, transactional, an acknowledgement rather than a reward. He moved on with the lesson. Ron stared at Harry from the side. "He gave you points," Ron whispered. "Snape gave a Gryffindor points in the first lesson. I don't think that's ever happened." "He respects preparation," Harry murmured back. "He hates performance and he hates incompetence." "I didn't do either. He gave my dad detention in 5th year for breathing too loudly during an exam," Ron said. "According to Fred." "Your dad probably breathed at him," Harry said. "I didn't." Ron looked at him, then looked at Snape, then back at Harry. "What are you?" he asked, not unkindly, more in the way of someone who needs to update their categories. "I'm someone who did his homework," Harry said, and that was true, and it was also only part of the truth, and the rest of the truth was 8 years of Bruce Wayne sitting across a chessboard from him and teaching him that every person in every room was a system, and systems had logic, and if you understood the logic you could work within it rather than against it. The defense classroom had a faint smell of garlic, which Harry identified before entering and catalogued without comment. Professor Quirrell's classroom was warm where the dungeons were cool, and the warmth had a slightly wrong quality, a degree or two too much, like a thermostat set by someone who was compensating for a chill that existed somewhere other than the room's temperature. Quirrell stuttered. Harry had known about the stutter from general report, but experiencing it was different from knowing about it, because the stutter was inconsistent. It was present when Quirrell was addressing the class in general, present when he was looking at notes, but it paused, briefly, when Quirrell was focused on something specific. When he turned to write on the board. When he was reading directly from a text. The stutter appeared when attention was on him and eased when attention was on something else. Genuine anxiety stutters didn't work that way. Harry sat in the middle of the classroom, not at the back where he could observe everything but not at the front where Quirrell might feel observed, and he worked through the double period on theoretical defensive concepts, protection charms, principles of magical shielding, with the appropriate level of visible engagement, which was genuine because the material was interesting, while his peripheral attention ran a continuous background process on the professor. By the end of the first defense lesson Harry had 11 observations in his notebook that, individually, could each be explained by anxiety disorder, nervous temperament, medical condition, or simple eccentricity. Together they outlined something he didn't have a full theory for yet, but that he labeled, in the notebook, as Quirrell, investigate further. Smell, sulfur plus, unknown. Posture, bilateral incongruence. Stutter, inconsistent, social anxiety pattern inconsistency. Temperature, anomalous. Body orientation, frequently reversed. Body orientation, frequently reversed. It was the strangest one. Quirrell kept turning away from the class in ways that looked like he was checking the board but weren't quite aligned with the board. He was turning toward the back of the classroom. Not away from the students, Harry thought. Away from the front. As though there was something at the back of his own head he was reflexively orienting toward, something that felt present and directional. Harry closed his notebook and helped Ron with his protection charm diagram and said nothing about any of it. The castle was the most interesting building Harry had ever been in, and he had been in some extraordinary buildings. Wayne Manor had secret passages and sublevels and a cave system extending under 3 miles of Gotham cliffside. It was, objectively, a more architecturally complex structure than Hogwarts. But Wayne Manor's complexity was engineered, designed with intention, built for purpose. Hogwarts felt like it had complexity the way a living thing had complexity, because it had grown, because it had changed, because centuries of magic had layered into its stones in ways that weren't designed so much as accumulated. It moved. That was the thing about it. Not dramatically, it wasn't constantly shifting, but it was never quite static. Staircases that went to the 4th floor on Tuesday morning might go to the 6th on Thursday afternoon. Certain corridors seemed to be longer than they were the previous day and shorter than they'd be the next. A portrait on the 3rd floor corridor smiled at Harry when he walked past, which portraits were supposed to do, but this one also winked in a specific direction each time, and Harry noticed the direction was always the same. He was in the castle for 11 days before he had the basic layout sufficiently mapped to trust his own navigation. He did it systematically, the way Bruce had taught him to map unfamiliar environments, walked every corridor at different times of day, noted what changed and what didn't, recorded dimensions by pace count and checked them against each other for internal consistency. He found 2 corridors that didn't exist on any map he'd sourced. He found a classroom that appeared to have been sealed from the inside. He found a bathroom on the 7th floor with a mirror that showed, when you approached it at a specific angle, not your reflection but a view of the corridor behind you, a monitoring position, he guessed, from some earlier security arrangement. He found, on the 3rd floor right-hand corridor, a locked door. He'd gone there on day 3. The corridor was slightly warmer than the others, had that same degree of quality as Quirrell's classroom, and the locked door at the end was a standard Alohomora-proof lock. He could tell from the visual signature of the enchantment, which he recognized from his theory reading. Something behind the door was breathing. Not loudly. Just the heavy rhythmic respiration of something large at rest. He stood at the door for 30 seconds, then walked away. He'd come back with better tools and better preparation. That was the rule. You never engaged with an unknown position without intelligence on what you were engaging. Bruce had drilled this into him with the persistence of someone who had learned it the hard way and did not want Harry to learn it the same way. He went instead to the library, where Hermione spent most of her non-class hours and had already established herself as someone the librarian, Madame Pants, both respected and watched the way one watches a very thorough reader who might carry books off without signing them out. "Tell me what you know about the Philosopher's Stone," Harry said, sitting down across from her. Hermione looked up. "Why?" "Because I think it's in the castle." She looked at him. She put down her quill. She said, "Tell me what you have." He laid it out, the third-floor corridor, the restricted section rumors he'd gathered from talking to older students with the casual social ease of someone who'd grown up learning how to make people feel comfortable enough to tell you things, the newspaper clipping from August he'd saved and cross-referenced, a Gringotts break-in, Vault 713, empty when the thieves arrived, and the timing, the specific timing relative to the school year starting, matched the movement of something valuable. Between a bank vault and a secure secondary location. He showed her the notebook. Hermione read through it with complete focus. She turned 2 pages back and reread something. Then she looked up. "The break-in at Gringotts," she said. "That was the same day Hagrid took you, to Diagon Alley. In the original accounts." "There are original accounts?" Harry said, sharply. "There's an article in the Prophet Archive. I found it when I was doing general background research." She pulled out her own notebook, equally dense, less tactical in structure, more broadly referenced. Someone tried to steal from a specific vault and found it already emptied. The same day as a Hogwarts-related visit to the bank. She looked at him. "You think Dumbledore moved it here?" "I think it's the most logical conclusion," Harry said. "A vault break-in that fails because the vault is already empty. A headmaster who in his opening address specifically directs everyone's attention to a particular corridor. A large breathing thing behind a locked door on that corridor. The thing behind the door is probably a Cerberus," Hermione said. "Three-headed dog. Traditional magical guardian. Incapacitated by music. It's in Fantastic Beasts." Harry looked at her. "You already knew." "I knew about the creature," she said. "I didn't connect it to the stone." She tapped her notebook. "I should have connected it to the stone. I had the Gringotts article cross-referenced, she stopped herself. "I should have connected it." "Now we both have," Harry said. "What do we do with it?" "We understand the full picture first," Harry said. "We don't move until we know what's there and why." He paused. "But someone else is also looking. Someone inside this school." Hermione went very still. "What do you mean?" "The smell," Harry said. "Sulfur and something else. I smelled it in Surrey when I was 11, magical criminal activity. I've smelled it twice in the castle. Once near the third-floor corridor. Once in the defense classroom." He let that land. Hermione connected it almost immediately. He could see the exact moment, the quality of her stillness changing. "Quirrell," she said. "I don't have proof," Harry said carefully. "I have a behavioral profile, a sensory match, and a theoretical framework. It's not proof. But it's enough to keep watching." Hermione was quiet for a moment. "We should tell Dumbledore." "With what? A smell and a behavioral profile?" "Dumbledore already knows someone might try for the stone, it's why the stone is here with these defenses. He set the trap. Maybe he's waiting to see who springs it." Harry paused. "Or maybe he knows exactly who it is and is managing it his way. Either scenario doesn't benefit from us walking in with partial intelligence and disrupting his op." "His op," Hermione said, with a tone between incredulous and admiring. "His operation," Harry translated. I know what op means, she looked at him. Do you think about everything like this? Like what? Like a mission. Harry thought about it seriously, because it deserved seriousness. I think about what's real, he said. What's actually happening, not what we want to be happening or what we're supposed to think is happening. Is that the same as a mission? In your case, Hermione said, probably yes. But she said it without judgment. She pulled her notebook back toward her and started adding to it. I'll research the stone's properties. Full defensive measures if they're documented. Secondary research on what someone would want it for. Immortality, Harry said. That's what someone would want it for. She looked up. Voldemort, Harry said. Not gone. Not destroyed. Weakened, incorporeal, surviving somehow. If he's directing someone in this castle to get him the stone, he didn't finish the sentence, because the finish was obvious. Hermione was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, in a different voice, quieter, you've been thinking about this since before you got here. Since I was 9, Harry said. She absorbed this. Are you scared? She asked. Not testing him, genuinely asking, the way she asked things when she actually wanted to know. Harry thought about it. Not of him, he said. Not really. I've been trained by someone who has fought things that would make most wizards quit on the spot and who has never once been stopped by fear. He paused. I'm scared of not being prepared enough. Of missing something. He stopped. Of other people getting hurt because I got something wrong. Hermione looked at him for a moment. That's a much more intelligent thing to be scared of, she said quietly. Yes, Harry said. I know. I'm working on it. They went back to their notes, and the library was quiet around them, and outside the windows the Scottish night came down early and cold and the torches in the corridor outside cast orange light through the glass, and if anyone had walked past they would have seen 2 11-year-olds sitting at a library table surrounded by books, which was entirely true and simultaneously one of the least accurate descriptions possible of what was actually happening. The troll came on Halloween. Harry had a bad feeling about Halloween from the morning, nothing specific, just the accumulation of small wrongnesses, the particular atmospheric pressure that he'd learned to associate with an environment that was building toward an event. Quirrell had been worse in class that week. More turned. More absent from his own face. The feast was loud and warm and carved pumpkins floated above the tables with candles inside them, and Harry was eating and talking to Ron about Quidditch. Ron's enthusiastic education of Harry on the subject was ongoing and increasingly detailed, when the doors slammed open and Quirrell staggered in. Troll, Quirrell shouted. In the dungeon. Thought you should know. And then he fainted, which was either very dramatic or extremely convenient, and the great hall erupted. Dumbledore restored order in 30 seconds with a single word and a demeanor that suggested he had managed considerably worse. Prefects began moving students to dormitories by house. Harry was already standing, already scanning the room, for Quirrell, who was being helped up, for Dumbledore, who was issuing rapid quiet instructions to the other staff, for the direction of panic flow and what it revealed about the troll's likely location. Harry, Ron said urgently. Hermione, Harry said. She went to the bathroom earlier. She doesn't know. Ron's face changed. Right, he said, immediately. They went against the student flow, which was easy because the students were all moving in one direction with the undifferentiated momentum of a crowd following instruction, and Harry and Ron moved through the gaps with the practiced ease of people who understood that crowds had physics and you could navigate their physics if you understood them. They found the bathroom on the second floor by following the smell, something dank and large and wrong in the way of things that had evolved in underground places, and the sounds, which were the sounds of something too big for a contained space trying to navigate that space anyway. The troll was inside. The troll was large. The troll was carrying a club that had apparently been used on the sink cubicles to generally unfavorable effect, and Hermione was backed against the far wall under what remained of the sink area, and she looked scared but not panicked, which was a distinction that mattered. Harry walked in, wand already out. The troll turned. It was 12 feet tall and the smell was extraordinary, and it had small eyes and an enormous club and the general physical presence of something that had been designed by nature with a very narrow agenda in mind. Harry looked up at it. The troll looked down at him. "Hermione," Harry said, without taking his eyes off the troll. "I'm going to need you to count in your head to 10 from now. When you hit 10, move left. Not right, there's debris. Left, toward the door. What are you going to do?" Hermione said, with the admirable precision of someone choosing practicality over exclamation. "I'm going to occupy its attention," Harry said. "With what?" "Myself," Harry said, and stepped forward. The troll swung its club. Harry stepped inside the arc of it. Bruce had spent 4 years teaching him to read weapon arcs before they completed, and put his wand hand up and pushed a burst of raw magical force through the kryptonite wand that hit the club like a hammer and deflected it into the wall. Stone cracked. The troll stumbled. Harry was already moving, around the troll's left side, and he felt the kryptonite wand hum with the specific frequency it produced when his magic ran through it hot, a warmth up his arm and a clarity in his head, everything sharp and immediate. "Ron," Harry said, "the ceiling." Ron, who had been standing in the doorway with his wand out and his face very pale, looked at the ceiling above the troll. "Wingardium Leviosa," he said, with a conviction he apparently found from somewhere, and the troll's own club, he'd aimed for the club, rose, wavering, above the troll's head. The troll looked up at its own club. Harry hit it with a concussive force blast from the wand, nothing complex, just power directed through the kryptonite core like light through a lens, and the troll sat down heavily on the bathroom floor with a sound like a tree falling. The club dropped on its head. The troll listed sideways and was still. Silence. Hermione was standing by the far wall with both hands pressed to her mouth, looking at Harry. Ron was standing in the doorway still holding his wand aloft with the expression of someone who has just done something significant without having quite planned to. Harry lowered his wand. "Good work with the club," Harry told Ron. Yes," Ron said. Yes. "Are you hurt?" Harry asked Hermione. She lowered her hands. She took a visible breath. "No," she said. "I'm not hurt." She looked at the troll. Then at Harry. Then at his wand. "What was that?" "That force blast, that's not in any first-year text." "It's not in any text," Harry said. "It's something I developed. The wand amplifies intent. If I push magical energy through it with a specific directional intent, it produces a kinetic effect. The theory is in," he stopped. This wasn't the moment for theory. He registered that. "Later," he said. "Tell me about the theory later. Are you sure you're not hurt?" "I'm sure," Hermione said, and then she did something he hadn't fully expected. She crossed the bathroom and grabbed both Harry and Ron in a single fierce embrace, the hug of someone who has just had all the adrenaline of genuine terror looking for somewhere to go. Ron went rigid with surprise. Harry held on. McGonagall arrived with Snape and Quirrell 40 seconds later and found the troll unconscious on the bathroom floor, 2 boys and a girl standing beside it, and evidence of what appeared to be significant structural damage to the sink area. McGonagall's eyes went over the scene with the rapid assessment of someone who has been teaching for a very long time and has seen the aftermath of many things but not precisely this thing. Her gaze landed on Harry's wand, then on the troll, then on Harry. "Explain," she said. Harry explained, concisely, in the order of operational relevance rather than dramatic narrative. McGonagall listened. Snape, standing slightly to the side, listened too, and his expression was the specific expression of someone revising a calculation. Quirrell looked at the troll. His expression was unreadable. McGonagall gave Ron and Harry 5 points each for sheer nerve, which she delivered with the tone of a woman simultaneously proud and alarmed, and deducted 5 from Hermione for being in the bathroom at the wrong time, which Hermione accepted with the air of someone who considers the outcome a net positive. She sent them back to Gryffindor Tower. On the way, in the corridor, Hermione fell into step beside Harry. The troll didn't wander in on its own, she said. No, Harry said. Someone let it in. As a distraction. Yes. To get to the third floor, she said. Yes, Harry said. But they didn't. Whatever they were trying was interrupted. He paused. I think we interrupted it, actually. Without meaning to. Hermione was quiet for a moment. So they'll try again. Eventually, Harry said. When they think conditions are better. He pulled out his notebook and added 3 lines. But now I know what the distraction strategy looks like. Which means next time I'll see it coming. Ron, walking on Harry's other side, looked at the notebook and then at Harry and then at Hermione and then straight ahead with the expression of someone making a decision. Right, Ron said. I'm in, then. Whatever it is you two are doing, I'm in. Harry looked at him. You might want to know what it is first. Probably, Ron agreed. But you saved Hermione with a thing that's not in any text, and you know things you shouldn't know, and you think 6 steps ahead of everyone, and that's, he searched for words. I grew up hearing about you-know-who. I grew up knowing it wasn't over. If you're the person who's actually doing something about it, he met Harry's eyes. I'm in. Harry looked at him for a moment. Ron looked back with the steady, open directness of someone who means exactly what he says, no more and no less. Okay, Harry said. You're in. Great, Ron said. Now can someone tell me what we're actually doing? Because I'd like to know that. 2 weeks later, Harry sat in the library at midnight. He sat there by choice, by design, and with the specific permission of Professor McGonagall, who had responded to his written request, formal, reasoned, citing the specific research project he was conducting and the library resources required, with the raised eyebrow of a woman who did not expect first-year students to submit formal written requests for after-hours library access and with a signed permission note that suggested she had decided to be curious about what he was building rather than preventative about it. He was building a map. Not a physical map, the Marauders map existed but he hadn't found it yet, though he'd noted the relevant rumors from older students and added its likely location to his investigation list, but an intelligence map. A diagram of the castle's power structures, the known variables, the unknown variables, the relationship between the stone and whoever was after it and what the sequence of moves would need to be. He heard the footsteps in the corridor outside a full 30 seconds before the door opened, which was long enough to close his notebook and pick up his charms text and look entirely like a student doing legitimate late-night study. Dumbledore walked in. He walked to the chair across from Harry's table and sat down with the unaffected ease of someone who has been sitting in library chairs for a very long time and finds them generally reliable. He folded his hands on the table. He looked at Harry over his half-moon spectacles with those blue eyes that were sharp and warm simultaneously, the eyes of a man who had spent his whole life learning people and still found them interesting. Good evening, Harry, he said. Professor, Harry said. You have McGonagall's permission for after-hours library access, Dumbledore said. I checked. I always check. I know, Harry said. I expected you to. You expected me to check your permissions. Dumbledore's tone was pleasantly neutral. I expected you to be aware that I was conducting extended research into certain topics, Harry said. And I expected that awareness to prompt a conversation. He paused. I thought it would happen before now, actually. Dumbledore's eyebrows rose slightly. I see. And why did you expect me to want this conversation? Because you're not a passive headmaster, Harry said. You've arranged an elaborate trap involving a very dangerous artifact and several layers of defense, and you're managing at least one active threat inside the castle, and a student arrives who has an operational interest in the relevant events and the preparation to actually be useful rather than incidentally in the way. He met Dumbledore's gaze. You'd want to know who I was. You've been watching me since I arrived. Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. That is either an impressive piece of analysis, he said, or you have access to information I'm not aware you have. Both, Harry said. Usually both. Another pause, longer. Dumbledore looked at him with an expression that was not quite what Harry had expected. He'd expected wariness, or the specific careful maneuvering of an extremely intelligent man deciding how much to reveal. What he saw instead was something more like wonder, though a complicated kind of wonder, edged with something that might have been sorrow. Your mother, Dumbledore said quietly, would sometimes look at a problem in exactly that way. Like she could see through it to the machinery behind it. Harry let the silence hold for a moment. I know, he said. I've read her notes. Dumbledore went very still. Not all of them, Harry said. The Gringotts Vault catalogue was forwarded to me by the bank. I've been reviewing what's been transcribed. She was working on soul magic. She was close to something. He paused. You knew about the Horcruxes. Harry. Dumbledore's voice was very quiet. You've known for some time, Harry said. Not accusatory. Factual. And you're playing a longer game than this year. The stone is a contingency. If it's taken and used, you lose ground. But losing the stone isn't the main game. The main game is years from now, when you have more information about what he's made and where it is. He paused. I can help with that. Dumbledore looked at him across the library table for a very long time. The silence was comfortable rather than strained, two people who were each waiting to see what the other would say next and were both patient enough to wait properly. You are 11 years old, Dumbledore said. Yes, Harry said. I know that too. What you're describing is real, Harry said. And I'm describing it because ignoring it doesn't make it less real. Voldemort isn't gone. He's going to come back. He's probably trying to come back right now, in this building, and when he does, the prophecy means we're going to face each other eventually. He kept his voice level. I would rather face him prepared and with allies than face him alone and uninformed. Dumbledore was quiet for so long that the fire in the library hearth shifted and settled. What do you know, Dumbledore said finally, about the night your parents died? I know what's documented, Harry said. I know about the killing curse and the reflection. I know about the love magic, my mother's sacrifice. He paused. I know there's something about what happened that night that neither the ministry records nor the general historical account fully explains. A protection that seems to have transferred, or persisted, or, I don't have the right theoretical framework for it yet. You are still protected, Dumbledore said. By your mother's sacrifice. While you can call the home of someone who carries her blood home, while you can call your guardian's house home, he stopped. I placed the protection's anchor in your guardian's home. Without his knowledge, I confess. He looked at Harry. Forgive me for that. I'll tell my father, Harry said. He'll want to understand the mechanism. He paused. He won't be angry. He'll analyze it. Yes, Dumbledore said, with a slight, sad smile. I imagine he will. He looked at the fire. Your father, Bruce Wayne, is a remarkable man. He is, Harry agreed. When he contacted me in September, Harry sat forward. He contacted you in September? By letter, Dumbledore said, and there was something in his tone that was not quite amusement. A very thorough letter. Single-spaced. With appendices. He looked at Harry. He outlined his concerns about your safety, his awareness of the general threat environment, his analysis of the school's defensive arrangements as far as he could determine them, and several recommendations for improvement. A pause. The appendices were about the enchanted Kevlar and rune threading in your suit and a detailed proposal for how it might be adapted for Hogwarts security architecture. Harry stared at him. Then he laughed, a real one, sudden and unguarded. Of course he did, he said. I found it, Dumbledore said, one of the most extraordinary letters I've received in 60 years of correspondence. He looked at Harry. I also found it reassuring, in a way I did not entirely expect to find it. The boy who was described in that letter, the boy your father described, is not someone who will be caught unprepared. That matters enormously. It won't be enough on its own, Harry said. No, Dumbledore agreed. It won't be. That is why we will talk more. Regularly, I think. He rose from his chair with the ease of a man who intends to leave but wants the leaving to be a full stop rather than a comma. I want you to tell me, as you learn things, as you find things, I want you to tell me. I want you to do the same, Harry said. Dumbledore paused. He looked at Harry with those blue eyes over those half-moon spectacles, and the fire had settled to coals behind him, and the library was enormous and quiet, and Harry looked back with the steady directness of someone who has been trained to mean what they say and say what they mean. Fair enough, Dumbledore said quietly. He walked out of the library and the door closed softly behind him, and Harry sat alone for a moment with his closed notebook and his charms text and the coals, and he thought about what had been said and what hadn't been said and what the shape of the remaining unknowns was, and then he opened the notebook again and added 4 lines and closed it and went to bed. Chapter 4, The Mirror and the Game. The first Quidditch match of the season was Gryffindor versus Slytherin, which the castle treated as a civic event of considerable importance. Breakfast the morning of was louder than usual, the Gryffindor table running at a particular frequency of collective anxiety that manifested in people eating too fast and talking too much and doing both simultaneously. Harry ate his eggs and read his Post. Oracle had brought 3 letters, one from Bruce, one from Alfred, one from Lucius. He opened Lucius's first, because Lucius's letters were always short and specific and contained information rather than sentiment, which meant you could read them quickly and get the sentiment from the other 2 at leisure. The secondary field readings you sent are consistent with what we observed in the lab. The disruption range appears to have expanded by approximately 12% since initial calibration. I believe this is the wand adapting to your magical signature over time, which was theoretically possible but not confirmed. Practically speaking, you are now resistant to a broader band of compulsion magic than when you left. Document any further changes. LFPS. I've been in contact with a researcher at a magical institute in Rome. She has information about Horcrux destruction methodology. Working on it. Harry folded the letter and put it in his robe pocket. Lucius's postscripts were doing more useful work than most people's main correspondence. Bruce's letter was longer. Bruce wrote the way he analyzed, in structured paragraphs with clear logic chains, but his letters to Harry always had a looseness to them that his professional communications didn't, a slight warmth at the edges that he'd never have put in a report. He'd written about Gotham, about a new Wayne tech project that Lucius was running in parallel with the magical research, about a conversation he'd had with Alfred about Harry's last letter. He wrote, Alfred has read your last 3 letters 4 times each. He won't confirm this but the where on the pages is diagnostic. And then, at the bottom, almost as an afterthought that was not an afterthought at all, I think about that cupboard sometimes. Not with guilt, or not only with guilt. With something like gratitude. Strange thing to be grateful for. But if that night had gone differently, I would have missed you entirely. That would have been a significant loss. Harry read this twice. Then he folded it carefully and put it in the inside pocket of his robes, which was where he kept things he wanted to keep close. Alfred's letter contained a recipe for proper scones, a weather report for Surrey delivered with the ironic gravitas of a man who found weather morally instructive, and the following, you will play well today. Not because you have been trained to play well, though you have, and not because you are naturally gifted at it, though you are. You will play well because you understand that the snitch is not the only thing worth paying attention to, and the best seekers always have. All my love. AP, are you done reading? Ron asked, from across the breakfast table, with the patience of someone who has been waiting for Harry to be done reading for some time. Yes, Harry said. Good, because Wood has been trying to get your attention for about 3 minutes. Ron pointed down the table to where Oliver Wood, Gryffindor's Quidditch captain, was making increasingly emphatic gestures. Harry waved at Wood in a way that communicated I am aware of you and will be at the pitch at the appropriate time and went back to his toast. He'd been on the Gryffindor team for 6 weeks, which was technically unprecedented. McGonagall had brought him directly to Wood after his first flying lesson, where Harry had retrieved Neville's Remembrall at a speed that had made the flying instructor go very still in the way of people recalibrating something significant. Harry had been flying since he was 9. Bruce had sourced a broom through Lucius's magical contacts and had cleared the largest open field on the manor grounds and had watched with the focused attention of a man who takes skill acquisition seriously as Harry figured out the physics of magical flight in an afternoon. He'd been refining it ever since. He liked Quidditch. He liked the specific demands of it, the three-dimensional thinking, the speed, the requirement to track multiple variables simultaneously across a large and constantly changing field. It mapped onto the same cognitive architecture as detective work and tactical planning. It was also, simply, the most fun he'd had doing anything physical since a particularly good sparring session with Bruce 2 summers ago. "You're not nervous," Hermione observed, from beside Ron. "No," Harry said. "Not even slightly." "Slightly," Harry admitted. "But in the productive way. The kind that sharpens things rather than muddying them." "Hermione's been reading books on Quidditch strategy since you made the team," Ron said. "I've been reading about Quidditch strategy," Hermione said, with dignity, "because it's relevant. Harry's playing his first competitive match today and the tactical literature is genuinely interesting if you approach it analytically." She paused. "Also, I may have written a short analysis of Slytherin's historical seeker tendencies." Harry looked at her. "Send it to me." "I already put it in your bag," she said, and went back to her breakfast. The pitch was enormous in the way that spaces feel enormous when they're full of people and noise and the specific collective electricity of an event. Harry stood in the Gryffindor changing room while Wood delivered a pre-match address that was approximately 45% tactical and 55% emotional, and Harry listened to both components with equal attention, because the emotional component was actually the more strategically important one. It told him where his teammates' heads were, who needed the tactic and who needed the feeling. He pulled on his Quidditch robes. They were Gryffindor red, which suited him, over his regular robes. He put his hand in his pocket and felt the wand there. He always had the wand, it was as automatic as breathing, and then put his hands on his broom handle and walked out into the noise. The stands were full. The sky was overcast and cold, with the kind of cold that had opinions about it. The Slytherin team was already on the pitch, robes silver green, and Malfoy was among them, not as a player but standing at the edge of the pitch in his robes, watching, with the specific quality of attention that wasn't quite cheering and wasn't quite neutral. Madam Hooch blew the whistle. The balls released. Harry kicked off. The world simplified. That was the thing about the air. On the ground, everything was layered and complex and demanded the multiple simultaneous processes that Harry's mind ran constantly. In the air, on a broom at speed, there was only the immediate and the responsive. Where you were going, what was coming, what the ball was doing. He climbed fast, higher than most seekers positioned themselves, because height gave you the survey position and the survey position was always worth the trade-off in speed. Below him, the game opened up. The chasers were fast, both sides, actually, but Gryffindor's chasers moved with a collaborative instinct that Slytherin's didn't quite match. Harry clocked this in his first pass over the field and stored it, not because it affected his immediate task but because understanding the whole game made the smaller decisions better. The Slytherin seeker was a third-year named Terence Higgs who was competent and aggressive and had a specific tendency, Harry identified it in the first 4 minutes, to feint toward whatever direction his opposite number was looking, a mirror technique that worked on seekers who were reacting to the opposing seeker rather than seeking independently. Harry made a note of this and filed it under not a concern. He found the snitch in 11 minutes. It was near the Slytherin goalpost, at the lower end of the pitch, hovering with the specific manic stillness that the snitch had before it decided to move. Harry saw it from altitude, clocked it, saw Higgs had not yet seen it. Higgs was watching Harry instead of the field, which was the mirror technique manifesting, and then Harry did something Bruce had drilled into him in a different context but which translated perfectly. he looked somewhere else. He turned his broom toward the other end of the pitch and moved with purpose, as though he'd seen something. Higgs responded immediately, following, because mirror seekers couldn't not follow, it was the whole tactic. Harry let Higgs gain slightly on him, just enough that the following felt real, felt like Higgs was going somewhere meaningful, and then he leaned hard left and dove. Full dive. The cold air turned to a roar. The pitch came up fast. Harry pulled the angle tight, came out of the dive horizontal at about 15 feet altitude, and the snitch was directly in his eye line, 5 yards ahead, still doing its hovering manic stillness thing, and his hand closed around it. The whistle blew. The noise from the Gryffindor stands was something Harry felt physically before he heard it clearly, a wall of sound that hit him as he pulled up and slowed, the snitch fluttering in his closed fist. He held it up. Lee Jordan's commentary came through the noise like a foghorn, and Wayne, Harry Wayne, what a dive, 11 minutes, I think yes, that is the fastest catching of the season, Gryffindor wins. Ron hit him in the shoulder hard enough to require steadying on the broom. Fred and George swept past on either side in a noisy pass. Wood was doing something that might have been crying while simultaneously claiming he wasn't. Harry looked at the snitch in his hand. It was small and gold and still trying to get its wings free. He let it, opening his fingers, and it shot away. In the stand, he saw Malfoy's face for just a moment, and what was on it wasn't anger, exactly. It was the specific expression of someone updating a threat assessment. Good, Harry thought, and landed. The weeks after the Quidditch match had a comfortable momentum to them, the rhythm of the school year establishing itself in the way school years did, the texture of classes, the specific knowledge of which corridors were cold and which were warm, the social topography of Gryffindor Tower becoming readable and navigable. Harry found himself, with a degree of surprise, simply in it. Not observing from outside it. Actually in it. Ron was easy. Ron was the easiest person Harry had encountered in either world. He had no performance, no angle, no agenda. He said what he thought, he ate what was available, he cared about Quidditch and chess and his family and his friends with a completeness that required no analysis. When Harry beat him at chess the third time in a row, Ron stared at the board for a full minute and then said, with genuine inquiry, "How?" and Harry explained, and Ron listened, and the next game Ron lasted 6 moves longer, and the game after that 9. And Harry found himself genuinely enjoying the chess in a way that was different from beating Bruce. Because Bruce played chess like warfare and Ron played chess like he was figuring something out, and watching the figuring out was its own pleasure. Hermione was more complex, not because she was difficult but because she was constantly running on multiple tracks simultaneously and Harry could see all of them, and the tracks were interesting. She was the most naturally intelligent person he'd met his own age, which was meaningful praise from Harry, who set the bar precisely. She had an approach to learning that was about completeness rather than application. She wanted to know everything about a subject, not just the useful parts, and Harry respected this even when it led them to genuinely argue about methodology. They argued a lot. The arguments were good. Neither of them pulled punches in an intellectual debate, and both of them changed position when the evidence required it, which was the only thing that made intellectual debate worth having. The argument about magical theory happened in early November and was one of their better ones. They were in the library, where they spent more time than most other places, to no one's surprise, and Harry had been working through the logic of how the Philosopher's Stone's protection layers related to one another, diagramming the defensive architecture on parchment. "The sequence is wrong," Hermione said, looking over his shoulder. "The sequence is logical," Harry said. "Each layer assumes the previous layer has failed. You go through them in order and each one is harder than the last because the person who designed it assumed you'd be depleted. That's exactly why the sequence is wrong," Hermione said, and sat down and pushed his parchment to the middle of the table so they could both see it. "If you design defenses assuming each layer will fail, you're designing for failure. The better design is defense in depth with non-sequential obstacles, things that require completely different skill sets so that the person who makes it through one isn't inherently better prepared for the next." Harry looked at the diagram. Then at Hermione. "That's a better design," he admitted. I know, she said, without smugness. But Dumbledore didn't design them for an expert attacker. He designed them for a specific attacker who has specific skills. They're not general defenses, they're targeted ones. Harry stared at the diagram. He knows the attacker, he said slowly. He knows what they can and can't do. These defenses aren't a generic trap, they're a specific trap. Hermione looked at him. Exactly. Which means he has a profile, Harry said. A specific operational profile of whoever's going to make the attempt. Which means he knows more than he's told us. More than he's told anyone, probably, Hermione said. They looked at the diagram together for a moment. We need to understand each obstacle, Harry said. Not just theoretically. What each one specifically tests. What would stop someone and what would let someone through. Then we reverse engineer the attacker profile from the design. I'll start with the Devil's Snare documentation, Hermione said, pulling out her notebook with the efficiency of someone who has already thought 4 steps ahead. It's the first obstacle based on the layout. What would it stop? Panic. Someone who panics physically is stopped. Someone who can stay calm or produce light passes through. Someone confident, Harry said. Someone who doesn't scare easily. He wrote on the parchment. Someone arrogant enough to believe they deserve to be there. Or trained enough not to panic, Hermione said, looking at him. Both, Harry said. The profile overlaps. Arrogant, trained, confident, specific skill set. He tapped the parchment. The flying keys. The chess. What does the chess specifically select for? Strategy, Hermione said. Pattern recognition under pressure. Willingness to sacrifice. Not brute magical force, Harry said. Someone who attacks through raw power would fail the chess because raw power isn't the solution. You need precision thinking. He paused. The troll. The troll is the simplest one, Hermione said. Physical power and nerve. But it comes after the chess, which is mental exhaustion. So you need physical capability after cognitive depletion. That's a specific fitness requirement. Harry looked at the sequence again. The designer of these obstacles knows someone clever and trained and physically capable and magically skilled is coming. And they've designed obstacles that would stop most people in each category. He looked at Hermione. This isn't Dumbledore expecting Voldemort directly. This is Dumbledore expecting a proxy. An agent. Someone Voldemort is directing. Who could get through all of these, Hermione said. Someone with all of these qualities, Harry said. He looked at the profile on the parchment and thought about the smell of sulfur and the turned body and the inconsistent stutter. Or someone who has help from Voldemort. Someone who isn't just operating alone, someone with additional power available to them. Hermione went very still. Quirrell. The qualities are Quirrell's qualities, Harry said. Trained wizard. Intelligent, he had to be, to get the job. Experienced traveler, he supposedly traveled for a year studying dark arts in the field. Physically capable enough. And if Voldemort is actively directing him, he has access to power that isn't strictly his own, Hermione finished. She looked at the diagram. Harry. We need to tell Dumbledore. We do, Harry agreed. But we still don't have proof. We have a profile that fits. We have observations. He thought for a moment. We need to document everything and present it together. A full intelligence brief, not just a concern. Hermione looked at him. An intelligence brief, she said. We're 11. Almost 12, Harry said. An almost 12-year-old should not need to prepare intelligence briefs, Hermione said, but she was already pulling out fresh parchment. They worked until Madame Pants threw them out at 9 o'clock. He found the Mirror of Erised on a Thursday night in December, 2 weeks before the Christmas holidays, while following a surveillance route he'd established to monitor the third-floor corridor at irregular intervals. He hadn't intended to find anything other than the usual, Quirrell's access patterns, the frequency of Filch's rounds, the specific behaviors of the 2 trick steps on the staircase up from the 2nd floor that his map had flagged. He turned down a corridor he'd passed before and found a room that he hadn't passed before, which meant either the castle had moved it or he'd missed it, and he hadn't missed it. He stood in the doorway and looked at the room. Empty. Stone floor. A single torch. And a large mirror propped against the far wall with a gold frame and an inscription running around the top, Eris stra eru oit ube kafru oit anwosi. Harry looked at the inscription for 3 seconds. Then he turned it, I show not your face but your heart's desire. Backwards, with a space rearrangement. Straightforward enough encryption. He crossed to the mirror and looked into it. He'd been briefed on it. Dumbledore had mentioned it in one of their weekly conversations, careful, hedged, in the way that Dumbledore mentioned things when he wanted you to understand them without quite explaining them. He hadn't known where it was or that Harry would find it. But he'd said, there is an object in this castle that shows people what they most want. It has driven people to madness. Most people, when they stand before it, see what they lack. What Harry saw was not what he'd expected. He saw Bruce. Standing in the Manor library, which was the room that had always felt most fully like home to him, and Bruce was reading, a book in one hand, tea in the other, entirely in his own world the way he got when he was genuinely absorbed in something. And Harry was sitting on the library floor, which was where Harry had always preferred to sit when he was reading in the library because the rug was good and the light from the east window fell exactly right. That was it. Just the 2 of them in the library. Both reading. Not talking. Not doing anything. Just that. Harry stood in front of the mirror and looked at it for a long time. He'd expected, what? His parents, maybe, which would have been appropriate and legible. His mother especially, given the eyes and the history and the weight of everything that connected them. He'd expected something about the war, maybe, a version of the future where it was over and everyone was safe. He'd expected something ambitious. Instead, the library. Bruce with his tea. Both of them reading. He stood there for several minutes. Not because he was trapped or drawn in the compulsive way the mirror could trap people, he was aware of what it was, and awareness was the most effective inoculation against most things. He stood there because it was genuinely good to look at, because it showed him something true about himself that he hadn't quite articulated before. He wasn't hoping for glory or power or the war to be over. What he wanted, at his most honest, was the thing that had been the foundation of everything, the person and the place that had made him who he was. He was thinking about this when Dumbledore's voice came from the doorway. You found it. Harry didn't turn around. Yes. Dumbledore walked to stand beside him. He looked at the mirror, and Harry looked at Dumbledore's reflection in it. In the mirror, Dumbledore looked the same as he looked in reality, which Harry thought was either a sign of extraordinary contentment or extraordinary discipline. What do you see? Dumbledore asked. My father and me reading in the library, Harry said. Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. Not your parents? Your biological parents? No, Harry said. He thought about it. I have grief about them. I do. I've thought about them enormously and I intend to know everything about them and I carry them with me. He paused. But what I most want is what I already have. I think that's actually the right answer. Dumbledore looked at the mirror for a moment longer. A man who stands before the mirror and sees what he already has, he said quietly, is either very content or very unimaginative. Or very trained, Harry said. Yes, Dumbledore agreed. Or very trained. He looked at Harry. I'm going to move the mirror. It isn't safe for students to find it routinely. I understand, Harry said. You're going to put it in the stone's defense system. As the final obstacle. Dumbledore turned to look at him. Only someone who wants to find the stone rather than use it would get it from the mirror, Harry said. That's what you told me, the desire for a thing versus the desire to possess and use it produces completely different internal experiences. The mirror would give the stone to someone who wants to find it rather than use it, and keep it from everyone else. He looked at Dumbledore. It's elegant. It's also the most completely non-forcible obstacle in the sequence. You can't brute force a mirror that reads your desires. Unless, Dumbledore said carefully, the person's desire is genuinely to protect it rather than use it. Then they should get it, Harry said. That's the point. A pause. Have you already worked out the full sequence? Yes, Harry said. With Hermione. We've prepared the brief. I was going to bring it to you this week. Dumbledore looked at him with that complicated blue regard. You and Miss Granger have been very thorough. We've been doing what the situation required, Harry said. He turned away from the mirror. The sequence is Quirrell with Voldemort directing him. The troll was his distraction on Halloween. He was going for the stone that night and we accidentally disrupted it. He'll try again when he thinks the conditions are better, probably when there's a cleaner distraction, probably when I'm not in the building, probably at the end of the year when the student population is disrupted by exams. He looked at Dumbledore. He'll try to get me out of the building, or he'll try to make sure I'm otherwise occupied. Watch for that. Dumbledore was quiet for a long moment. The torchlight moved in the room, and the mirror showed them both, and outside in the castle the evening settled into night. Harry, Dumbledore said. Professor. You are, without question, the most remarkable first-year student this school has ever had. He said it not as flattery but as a kind of accounting. And I am genuinely uncertain, on a near-daily basis, whether that is something to be glad of. Harry smiled, the real one. Alfred says the same thing. He's also glad. Then I am in good company, Dumbledore said, and for a moment his expression was entirely unguarded, warm and sad and real. Go to bed, Harry. The mirror will be moved by morning. Harry went. In the corridor, he pulled out his notebook and wrote one line, Mirror, verify Dumbledore moves it. Monitor for Quirrell behavior change indicators, increased urgency equals earlier timeline. Accelerate brief preparation. He closed the notebook and walked back toward Gryffindor Tower, through the corridors that had become familiar and navigable and genuinely his over 4 months, and he thought about the library and the mirror, Bruce with his tea, both of them reading, and felt something that was not sadness and not nostalgia but was something warmer than either. He was going to go back to that library at Christmas. He had 3 weeks. That was enough to carry. He went back for Christmas, and the manor was extraordinary in December in the way it was always extraordinary in December. Alfred had opinions about Christmas decoration that he executed with the focused artistry of a man who considers seasonal presentation a serious discipline. The library had a fire going and pine boughs on the mantel and the specific smell of the manor at Christmas, which was wood smoke and shortbread and old books, and Harry sat on the rug with his back against the sofa and read and Bruce sat in the chair and read and neither of them talked for 2 hours and it was exactly what the mirror had showed him. He gave Bruce the intelligence brief over dinner, having sent Lucius his copy in advance. Bruce read it at the table, in silence, while Alfred served the first course with the serene unconcern of a man who has long since accepted that intelligence briefings at the dinner table were a feature of this household rather than a bug. Bruce put the brief down when he finished it. He looked at Harry. Quirrell, he said. Quirrell, Harry confirmed. With Voldemort directing. Yes. Your evidence is significant. Not court standard, but operationally solid. That's what Hermione and I concluded, Harry said. Bruce looked at the brief again. Then at Harry. You went to see Dumbledore. Multiple times. We have a standing weekly arrangement. I know, Bruce said. He told me. He wrote again in October. A pause. He says you argue with him. I disagree with him on 3 specific points, Harry said. I try to do it respectfully. What points? Harry ticked them off. His information-sharing methodology, he keeps things too close, too long, and it costs tactical options. His approach to Quirrell, managing it rather than resolving it, introduces risk every day it continues. And his reliance on the protective enchantments around the school without accounting for internal threats. He paused. He's brilliant and he's right about most things and I trust him. But brilliant people have blind spots and he has 3 that I can see. Bruce looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked at Alfred, and Alfred looked back with the expression of a man who finds this moment entirely satisfying but intends to maintain composure. He's right about the information sharing, Bruce said to no one in particular. He is, Alfred agreed. He usually is. Don't make me say it twice, Bruce said. Wouldn't dream of it, sir, Alfred said, and refilled his wine glass. Harry looked at both of them. What am I missing, he asked, because there was something in the exchange, some communication in the looks. Bruce was quiet for a moment. When you were 9, he said, and you read the history book and you came to find me in the cave. You asked if you were in danger. Yes. And I told you I didn't know. Yes. I knew more than I said, Bruce said. I'd had 2 years of intelligence on the wizarding world by then. I knew about the prophecy, the full text of it, from a ministry contact. I knew what it said about power beyond either of you, about neither being able to live while the other survived. He looked at Harry steadily. I told myself you were too young for the full weight of it. I was applying exactly the logic I was criticizing Dumbledore for. Harry looked at him. He sat with it for a moment, not the content of the prophecy, which he could follow up on and whose bones he'd already inferred from the existing evidence, but the admission itself. The deliberate honesty of it. Tell me the full text now, Harry said. Bruce told him. Word for word, which meant he'd memorized it, which meant he'd been carrying it for years. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the 7th month dies, and the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal, but he will have power the Dark Lord knows not, and either must die at the hand of the other, for neither can live while the other survives. Harry listened. He looked at his plate for a moment when Bruce finished. Then he looked up. Power the Dark Lord knows not, he said. Yes, Bruce said. What does that mean to you? Harry asked. When you read it. What do you think it is? Bruce considered. When I first read it, I assumed it was something innate. A magical quality, something specific to you. He paused. I've revised that. Over time, watching you, I think it might be everything. The way you were raised. The way you think. The way you approach problems. The combination of 2 worlds in one person. He looked at Harry. I think the power the Dark Lord doesn't know is everything we've been building since that night in Surrey. Harry was quiet for a moment. Then he said, with complete honesty, I think you might be right. But I also think it's something more specific. And I'll figure it out. He picked up his fork. Pass the potatoes. Bruce passed the potatoes. Alfred, from the direction of the kitchen, said, I made an apple tart for dessert. Good, Harry said. We've earned it. The weeks after Christmas carried a different quality. Harry noticed it when he came back to Hogwarts in January, a slightly accelerated atmosphere, something tighter. He noticed it in Quirrell first, whose pattern had shifted, less wandering the corridors in the evenings, more time in his office with the door warded, a new quality of distraction in his teaching that suggested something was demanding cognitive resources he needed for class. Accelerating timeline, Harry noted. He noticed it in Snape too, and this was more complex. Snape had been watching Quirrell. Harry had observed this with some satisfaction, because it confirmed his read on Snape as someone whose loyalties were more complicated than his surface presentation and whose protective instincts, however buried under contempt and difficulty, ran towards something real. Snape was watching Quirrell the way Harry was watching Quirrell, which meant Snape had his own intelligence picture and had reached similar conclusions. Harry went to Snape's office on a Tuesday afternoon in February and knocked on the door. A pause. Then, enter. The potions classroom was one thing but Snape's office was another, smaller, darker, the shelves dense with specimens and ingredients and the specific organized chaos of a working research space. Snape was grating at his desk and looked up when Harry came in with the expression of a man who is not surprised by many things and has just encountered one of the few things that surprised him. "Mr. Wayne," Snape said. "Professor," Harry said. "I think you and I should talk." "Should we?" Snape said. It was very flat. "About Quirrell," Harry said. "And about what we both know." Snape looked at him for a long moment. The silence had a testing quality to it. Snape was doing what Snape always did in silence, which was conduct a rapid and generally unfavorable assessment of the person across from him. Harry let the assessment proceed without fidgeting, without filling the silence, because Bruce had taught him that silence was its own kind of argument and the person who filled it first generally did so because they were less certain. "You're 11, Snape said. "Almost 12, Harry said. "And I'm aware that you've been monitoring Professor Quirrell. I'm aware that you disrupted something he was attempting at the Quidditch match." Snape went very still, "because my broom began behaving erratically in a way consistent with a jinx and I tracked the direction of the eye contact that was coordinating it and found two separate sets of eyes both aimed at me, one of which was Quirrell's and one of which was yours. Quirrell was jinxing. You were counter-jinxing." He paused. "I don't know why you were counter-jinxing. I have theories." Snape was very still. "But I know you were protecting me," Harry said. "Which tells me enough." The silence this time was different. Something in Snape's expression had changed, not softened, because Snape's face did not do softening, but shifted, as though a calculation had produced an unexpected result and the result was being examined. "Your analytical capacity," Snape said, with the specific tone of a man who finds a thing impressive and is constitutionally reluctant to say so, "is not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Your father's arrogance and your mother's talent," Snape said. "Packaged in someone else's methodology." He looked at Harry with those dark eyes. "Instead I find something considerably more unsettling." "I'll take that as a compliment," Harry said. "It was not necessarily meant as one," Snape said, but the edge of it was slightly dulled. He set down his quill. "What do you want, Mr. Wayne?" "To know what you know," Harry said. "About Quirrell. About the stone. About the timeline." He paused. "I've been building an intelligence picture for 6 months. I think yours is better in certain areas because you've been doing it longer and your access to Quirrell professionally is closer than mine. I think mine is better in certain areas because I have resources and context you don't." He looked at Snape steadily. "We're both trying to prevent the same thing. Pooling intelligence is more efficient than operating in parallel." Snape looked at him for a very long moment. "Your mother," Snape said, and stopped. He looked away, toward the window that showed a slice of grey Scottish afternoon, and his expression did something complex and private that he pulled closed again almost immediately. "Your mother would have done exactly this. Come in, sit down, and propose a collaboration with the precision of a legal argument." Harry sat down, because the mention of sitting was the nearest thing to an invitation Snape was going to give. "She was brilliant," Harry said. "I'm told. From everyone who knew her. She was," Snape said, with a precision that had grief in it somewhere underneath. He turned back from the window. "What I know about Quirrell," he said, in the tone of a man making a decision and committing to it cleanly, "is this." He told Harry. And Harry told Snape. And by the end of an hour they had an intelligence picture that was considerably better than either of them had separately, and Snape had given Harry 2 specific pieces of information that he hadn't had, the nature of the final obstacle beyond the devil's snare and keys and chess and troll, and the specific nature of the enchantment Dumbledore had placed on the stone's last protection. When Harry left, Snape watched him go from the doorway of his office and said nothing. Harry heard, in the corridor, a sound that was very quiet and might have been, it probably wasn't. It probably wasn't. But it might have been Severus Snape saying, very quietly, to no one, Lily. Harry walked back to Gryffindor Tower with his notebook full and his understanding of the board significantly more complete, and he thought about his mother and about Snape and about the ways that grief and guilt and love wound around each other in people into shapes that were sometimes impossible to untangle. He thought about the library in the mirror. He thought, I have enough. When the time comes, I'll be ready. He was right. Chapter 5, The Gauntlet. The signal came on a Wednesday in June, and Harry almost missed it because it was so clean. He'd been watching for it for 2 months. He'd modeled 14 different distraction scenarios with Hermione, cross-referenced them against Quirrell's behavioral patterns, flagged 4 specific categories of event that would serve as ideal cover for an attempt on the stone. He'd been so thorough about it that when the actual signal arrived, his first instinct was to question whether it was real. Dumbledore received an owl at breakfast. Harry was watching the staff table. He did this every morning, a 30-second scan before he touched his food, the same way Bruce scanned every room he entered, and he saw Dumbledore's face when he read the letter. Saw the deliberate stillness, then the decision being made, visible in the set of the old man's shoulders. Saw Dumbledore lean to say something to McGonagall. Saw McGonagall's expression go carefully neutral in the way that professionals went neutral when they were managing a response. Dumbledore folded the letter. Stood. And left the great hall. Harry looked at his food. He picked up his fork and set it down again. He's leaving the castle, he said quietly. Hermione, beside him, went still. Ron, across from him, stopped mid-chew. How do you know? Hermione asked. McGonagall is covering the scan of the room. She's doing what he does every morning, checking head count, checking for anything unusual. That's not a normal breakfast task for her. He's handed something off. Harry pushed his plate back. And Quirrell isn't here. Ron swallowed. He's not always at breakfast, he's been at every breakfast for 2 weeks, Harry said. I've been tracking it. When his pattern breaks it's significant. He looked at Hermione. He moved last night or this morning. He's already gone in or he's going in now. Hermione's hand went to her wand. We should tell McGonagall. By the time we explain it to McGonagall and she believes us and acts on it, Quirrell is through 3 obstacles, Harry said. I've been through the logic. We go. He stood. Both of you can stay. I mean that, this isn't your fight. Ron stood up the same moment Harry did. Said that once before. Still in. Hermione stood. If you say, it's too dangerous I will hex you, she said, with the calm certainty of someone stating meteorological fact. Harry looked at them both. He felt something, the weight of it, the specific gravity of being responsible for people you care about, which Bruce had warned him about years ago and which landed differently when it was actually happening. Okay, he said. Here's what we do. They sent a letter first. Harry wrote it in 50 seconds standing at the foot of the Gryffindor Tower stairs, compact and specific. Quirrell is making his attempt now. We're going in after him. 3rd floor. Please send word to Dumbledore. And handed it to Ron with Oracle on his wrist. Get this to McGonagall's office, Harry said. Oracle knows where she is, she can track people she's delivered post to before. Then meet me at the 3rd floor corridor. 3 minutes. Ron took the letter and Oracle and went. Harry and Hermione were already moving. They took the fastest route Harry had mapped, which was not the most obvious route, which meant they passed 2 of Filch's regular patrol points in the gaps between his rounds and arrived at the 3rd floor corridor without incident. Ron was 30 seconds behind them, arriving at a controlled run that he hadn't broken into a sprint for, which was good discipline that Harry noted. The locked door at the end of the corridor was open. Not broken open. Unlocked and standing ajar, which told Harry that Quirrell had taken it cleanly, either with significant skill or with inside knowledge of the enchantment, and both of those told him something about the level of preparation they were dealing with. Through the door, the sound of something breathing heavily in 3 separate rhythms. "Cerberus," Hermione said quietly. "Asleep," Harry said, leaning in to listen. The 3-part breathing had the slow regularity of deep sleep, not the shallower rhythm of alert rest. Quirrell put it under. He used music, you can smell it. Faint in the air, below the damp and the dog smell, a trace of something melodic and magical, the resonance of a charm that had done its work and dissipated. The harp over there is still going. A small enchanted harp sat near the dog's enormous flank, playing something slow and low that barely registered as music, more as a felt vibration. "We go through fast," Harry said. "Don't look at the faces. Don't make noise. Move." He went first. The Cerberus was massive, 3 heads on one body, each the size of a small car, the whole thing taking up most of the floor space and smelling like a thunderstorm inside a kennel. Harry moved around its left flank with the quick, low-profile movement Bruce had drilled into him for urban close-cover situations, and it was the same principle, different context, and the principle held. He was through and at the trapdoor before 10 seconds. Hermione was 5 seconds behind him. Ron was 4 seconds behind Hermione and was, to his considerable credit, completely silent. The trapdoor was open. Harry dropped through. The devil's snare grabbed him immediately. He'd read about it. He knew the mechanism: the more you struggled, the more it constricted, the entire point being to trap motion-reactive animals and people who panicked. He didn't panic. He went completely still, and the plant's constriction slowed, and he reached through the stillness for his wand and produced a controlled burst of light, not the full lumos but a focused warm beam directed at the plant matter holding him, and the snare recoiled from the light with a sound like something deflating and released him. He dropped the remaining 6 feet to a dirt floor. Hermione landed beside him 2 seconds later, having done the same with her own lumos. Ron dropped through a moment after, having clearly panicked for exactly as long as it took to hear Hermione say, "Stop moving," from below, and then gone still and produced his own light. He landed harder than either of them, caught himself, looked up at the retreating snare. "That," Ron said, "was horrible." "First one," Harry said, "already moving. 5 to go." The key chamber was lit by 1,000 winged keys flitting around a high-ceilinged vault and a broom parked against one wall. Quirrell had been here. The lock on the door ahead was already turned and a smear of something dark on the door frame told Harry he'd come through with speed and not perfect grace. He'd grabbed the key and gone. Harry looked at the swarm above them, assessed, grabbed the broom, and launched. He found the right key in 40 seconds. It was the one with the slightly bent right wing, recently used, slightly damaged from recent catching. He snatched it out of the air with the same hand that had caught the snitch in his first Quidditch match, unlocked the door, and held it while Hermione and Ron came through. "You're showing off," Ron said. "I'm being efficient," Harry said. "It looks like showing off." "Then I'm efficiently showing off." The chess room stopped them for 90 seconds, which was the only pause that came anywhere close to inconvenient. The giant chess set stood waiting, pieces on their squares, the path through to the door ahead blocked by the board. The pieces were enormous, shoulder height on a grown man, waist height on Harry. They stood with the patient, carved permanence of things that have always been there and expect to continue being there. Harry looked at the board. He looked at the positions of the pieces. They'd reset after Quirrell came through, which meant he was dealing with a fresh configuration. "I need 2 minutes, Harry said. "We might not have 2 minutes, Hermione said. "We might not, but I need them," Harry said, and he was already running the board, his eyes moving in the rapid systematic pattern that Bruce had recognized and called his chess face. He saw the path in 45 seconds. It required sacrificing the rook and the knight to draw the opposing queen, then a bishop's diagonal to protect the approach line, then a straight run with the remaining knight to the king's diagonal blind spot. "Bishop to e6, Harry said. "Rook to d4. Knight to g5. "We walk when the queen takes the rook." He looked at them. "Don't hesitate when I say walk." The window is 6 moves. The pieces moved when commanded, enormous stone grinding on stone, and they moved with the focused inevitability of a system designed to be beaten by the right mind. Harry narrated the sequence in the clipped shorthand of someone talking through a plan under time pressure, and Hermione executed it beside him, and Ron took the rook's position and was struck by the queen's blow and flung to the side of the board hard enough to make Harry's stomach lurch. Ron sat up. "I'm fine," he said, breathless, before Harry had spoken. "Go." "I'm fine, just go." Harry looked at him for a fraction of a second, long enough to verify the assessment was accurate, because Ron's eyes were clear and he was already moving to sit against the wall. "Stay there," Harry said. "McGonagall will come." "I know," Ron said. "Be careful." Then, because he was Ron, "Be more careful than you think you need to be." Harry held his gaze for a moment. "Always," he said, and meant it specifically for Ron, and went. The troll chamber was simple. The troll was already unconscious. Quirrell had handled it before them, probably efficiently, probably without the structural bathroom damage of the Halloween encounter. Harry and Hermione went through quickly, wands out, Harry scanning for any sign that the troll was more conscious than it appeared. It wasn't. They were through the door in under a minute. The potion room had a table with 7 bottles of different sizes and a rolled piece of parchment, which Harry picked up. A logic puzzle. He read it once, analyzed it in the 30 seconds it took Hermione to read it, and pointed at the smallest bottle on the right without looking up from the parchment when Hermione finished. "That one," he said. She looked at the parchment, ran the logic herself, it took her 40 seconds, which was genuinely fast, and looked at the bottle. "The same one I get," she said. "Good. Both of us shouldn't go forward." "I'm going forward," Hermione said, with the tone that closed arguments. "Hermione." Harry looked at her. "I need you to do 3 things. Get back to Ron. Make sure he's all right. Then get out of the castle and owl my father. Not the ministry, not anyone else, my father first. Tell him what's happening and where." Hermione looked at him. He could see her running the argument, and he could see her finding the logic of it sound, and he could see her not liking the logic being sound, which was a specifically Hermione expression that he'd come to know well. "If you're not back in 2 hours," she started. 2 hours is too long," Harry said. 1 hour. "If I'm not out in 1 hour, send Bruce in." She looked at him for a moment longer. Then she did something that was very fast and very deliberate. She grabbed his arm, briefly, her hand tight on his wrist. "Come back," she said. "That's the plan," Harry said. He drank the potion. Cold as ice, and he walked through the black fire, and the last thing he heard in the potion room was Hermione extinguishing the purple flame behind him, going back the way they came, doing exactly what she'd been asked to do. The last room was underground and warm. Not the good warmth of a fire or a body or the Great Hall. The wrong warmth, the degree-off quality he'd been tracking since September, the warmth of something that was compensating for a cold it carried with it. The mirror of Eriste stood against the far wall. Dumbledore had moved it here, as Harry had predicted, as the final obstacle, and it stood in this room the way it had stood in the corridor, gold-framed, present, with that specific quality of waiting. Quirrell stood in front of it. His back was to Harry. His posture was rigid with the specific frustration of someone who has come very far and hit the last wall, and the last wall is the one they don't know how to break. He was staring at the mirror with an intensity that was working against him. The more desperately you wanted something, the less the mirror cooperated with you, and Quirrell wanted this with the desperate singularity of a man who has committed everything to a single outcome. Harry walked into the room. Quirrell turned. And his face, when he turned, was not quite his face. It was his face with something else in it, something that looked out through Quirrell's eyes with a focus and an intelligence and a cold, specific recognition that didn't belong to the stuttering defense professor who taught them all year. "Harry Potter," said the voice in Quirrell's throat. "Or Wayne, I suppose." How very unexpected. Harry had his wand out, down at his side, not raised. He looked at Quirrell's face, and what he was really looking at was the presence behind it, and what he felt about that presence was something Bruce had explained once as the difference between fear and threat assessment. Fear was emotional and reactive. Threat assessment was analytical and actionable. Threat assessment said, Voldemort, weakened, no body, directing a host. Quirrell's own magic available but degraded. Voldemort's native power available but limited by the host's capacity. Primary attack vectors, unforgivable curses, which require significant power to cast reliably and which my wand will disrupt. Secondary attack vectors, Quirrell's own combat magic, physical approach. Primary vulnerability, the host connection. Quirrell is the anchor. The anchor is the weakness. All of this in the 2 seconds between Quirrell turning and Harry speaking. "Hello," Harry said. Quirrell, Voldemort, tilted their shared head. "You are remarkably calm." "I've been expecting this conversation for 2 years," Harry said. "Longer, actually. 2 years." A pause. "The Muggle. The Batman." The voice said it with the specific contempt of someone who finds the concept insulting. "The boy who lived, handed to a Muggle. Raised by a Muggle. Armed by a Muggle." A cold pause. "It is an obscenity." "It's an education," Harry said. "There's a difference." He was moving as he said it, not toward Quirrell, laterally, a slow arc, putting the mirror more fully into his sightline while not breaking eye contact. Not closing distance. Not retreating. Assessing the room. One door. The mirror behind Quirrell. Sufficient ceiling clearance. Stone floor, no carpet, no traction complications. He noted all of it the way he'd been taught to note all of it, building the operational picture without telegraphing that he was building anything at all. "You've come for the stone," Voldemort said through Quirrell's mouth. "I've come to stop you taking it," Harry said. "There's a difference there too." Such precision. A pause that might have been satisfaction. "I have studied your guardian, you know. The Batman. A remarkable man. Extraordinary will. No magic at all, and yet, the pause had a different quality. He makes people afraid of the dark. I have made people afraid of the dark for 50 years. We might have found much in common." "He doesn't torture people for fun," Harry said. "He hangs them off buildings," Voldemort returned. "Semantics. Functionality," Harry said. "The goal is compliance, not suffering. When suffering is the point, it says something about the person causing it." Quirrell's hand moved. Harry was already moving when it moved. He'd been watching the hand, specifically, because hands telegraphed casting intention before the wand came up, and Quirrell's wand hand had shifted in the specific way of a wrist about to rotate. Harry stepped left and the first curse hit the stone to his right with a crack that sent fragments across the floor. He didn't cast back. He moved again, right, forward, closing the distance at an oblique angle, the approach vector that put him inside the arc of the follow-up that Quirrell was already lining up. He felt the next spell heat the air past his ear, that specific sensation of close passage that he'd once asked Bruce about and Bruce had said meant you were moving well but not quite well enough, and Harry agreed and adjusted. "You're not attacking," Voldemort said through Quirrell, and the cold voice had a note of genuine curiosity in it. "Not yet," Harry said. "You're waiting." "I'm learning." He was. Every curse Quirrell threw told him something, about Quirrell's wand proficiency, about the delay between Voldemort's decision and Quirrell's execution, about the rhythm of the partnership between host and possessor. There was a lag. A fraction of a second between Voldemort's intent and Quirrell's movement, the signal delay of 2 wills sharing a body that was primarily one person's. Harry clocked the lag at roughly a quarter second, which was significant, which was actionable. He raised his wand. What came out of the Kryptonite wand was not a spell with a name. Harry had been developing it since he was 10, working with the wand's specific properties in the practice spaces Lucius had set up for him, and it was fundamentally simple, a burst of the wand's disruption field, amplified and directed, like a searchlight instead of ambient illumination. Not an attack on Quirrell. A direct broadcast of the kryptonite frequency aimed at the point of connection between the host and the possessor. The effect was immediate. Quirrell stumbled. Not from impact, from interference. He grabbed his own head, which was specifically significant because Quirrell grabbing his own head was Quirrell responding to something Voldemort was doing, or something that was happening to Voldemort. The cold voice came from Quirrell's mouth in something that was not quite a word, more a sound of interference, of static, of a signal being jammed. There it is, Harry thought. That's an interesting sensation, isn't it? Harry said. He kept his voice conversational, because Bruce had taught him that maintaining a conversational tone in a high-stakes situation controlled the emotional temperature of the room, and he needed the temperature controlled because what he was doing next required precision, not power. The disruption. That's the kryptonite in my wand's core. It affects all magical frequencies above a certain intensity threshold, including the frequency you're using to hold on to Professor Quirrell. Quirrell's face was going through something complicated, the two-person architecture of it becoming visible in a way it hadn't been before, the human face and the possessing intelligence both expressing themselves separately, briefly, both fighting for the forward position. I can hold this frequency, Harry said, indefinitely. My wand is keyed to my magical signature, the longer I push through it, the more efficient the output. You can try to break it, but breaking it will cost you, and you are already operating in a significantly weakened state relative to your actual capability. He paused. Or we can have the conversation. The conversation. Quirrell's voice, not Voldemort's, cracking through for a moment, then Voldemort, smoothly taking it back. You want to talk. I want you to understand your position, Harry said. You're weakened. You're in a borrowed body that is currently being electromagnetically, magically, separated from your presence. You can expend significant energy fighting that, or you can listen. He kept the disruption field steady. Dumbledore has been alerted. He's coming back. The Ministry is being notified. You have a narrowing window here. Then I should act quickly, Voldemort said, and there was nothing cold in it now, just the flat certainty of a chess player announcing their move, and Quirrell's wand came up and the curse was green and Harry had been waiting for it. He didn't dodge this time. He raised the kryptonite wand and held it in the direct path of the curse. The killing curse hit the disruption field at full extension and came apart. Not reflected. Not absorbed. Came apart, the structure of it fragmenting, the intent that gave the spell its function unraveling as the kryptonite frequency dismantled the cohesive magical architecture the way a high-frequency signal breaks a complex lock. It dissolved around Harry like smoke finding a draft, the green light dispersing into flickers and nothing, and Harry stood in the nothing and let out one careful breath and held his ground. The silence after was complete. Quirrell stared at him. And what was in his stare was something Harry had not expected to see in the face of Voldemort in any form, at any power level, in any circumstance. It was fear. The killing curse, Harry said, requires a clean magical delivery to maintain structural coherence. It's not resistant to disruption, nothing is resistant to disruption at high frequency, it's just that nobody has ever disrupted it before because nobody has had a wand core with these properties. He lowered his wand slightly. You couldn't have known. How could you know? The wand's never been used in combat. There are no records of the kryptonite mineral being used this way. He paused. You're working from incomplete intelligence. And you are not, Voldemort said. The fear was contained now, locked away with the speed of someone who has survived 50 years on the basis of never showing vulnerability. But it had been there, and Harry had seen it, and they both knew he'd seen it. I spent 2 years building the picture, Harry said. Quirrell moved, not a curse this time, physical movement, rushing him, because Voldemort had decided that the magical approach was compromised and was switching vectors, and the physicality of it was genuinely fast. Quirrell's body moved with Voldemort's will behind it and Voldemort's will didn't flinch or hesitate. Harry met it. Not as a wizard. as someone who had been in Bruce Wayne's training room for 8 years. He caught Quirrell's wand arm at the wrist, controlled the wrist, turned the force of the rush into a pivot and a controlled throw that put Quirrell's back against the stone wall hard enough to knock the wind out. He kept the wrist, stepped in, and put the kryptonite wand against Quirrell's temple. The disruption field at contact range was not ambient. It was total. Quirrell screamed. It was two voices simultaneously, Quirrell's pain and Voldemort's rage, layered over each other, discordant, the sound of a connection being severed by force. Harry felt it through his own hand, the physical sensation of the kryptonite field pushing against the possession with the same quality as two magnets at repelling polarity, a force that wanted to push them apart and was finally close enough to do so. Quirrell's skin where Harry's hands touched it was, wrong. Burning. Blistering. Harry pulled back instinctively when he felt it and Quirrell folded to his knees, and Harry looked at his own hands and his hands were fine, unburned, and Quirrell's face where the wand had touched him was badly damaged. "Your mother's protection," said a voice that was not coming from Quirrell. It came from no clear direction. From the room. From the air. A voice without a body, thin and cold as high-altitude wind, and Quirrell was limp on the floor and the voice was free of him, untethered, and the room was suddenly 10 degrees colder. "It burns when you touch him," the voice said. "Your mother's sacrifice. Still burning, after all this time." A pause. How extraordinary. Harry stood with his wand raised. Pointing at nothing. At the air where the voice seemed most located. "Professor Quirrell needs medical attention," Harry said. Professor Quirrell, the voice said, with a dryness that was genuinely surprising in its precision, made his choices. "As we all do." A pause. "You are not what I expected, Harry Potter." "Wayne," Harry said. "Wayne," the voice conceded. "Whatever the name. You are not what I built my plans around. The boy in my calculations was different." A pause. "Smaller. I grew up differently," Harry said. "Yes." The voice moved, Harry tracked it by the cold, turning slowly, keeping it in front of him. "You carry both worlds in you. Muggle and magical. The detective and the wizard." A long pause. "I made myself only one thing. I thought that was strength." "It was a mistake," Harry said. "You narrowed your tools." "Yes," the voice said. And for a moment, just a moment, the thin cold voice sounded like something other than what it was. Not human, exactly. But something that had been human once and remembered what that meant. "You cannot kill what has no body," it said. "You know that." "I know," Harry said. "Tonight isn't about killing you. Tonight is about stopping you." He watched the cold space where the voice lived. "You'll try again. I know that too. And you will be ready again," the voice said. "How tiresome." "Get used to it," Harry said. The cold shifted. The torches in the room guttered and flared as something moved through the air, moved toward the door, through the door, away, the temperature rising 2 degrees in its wake and then settling, and the room was empty except for Harry and Quirrell's unconscious body and the mirror of Ariste showing Harry his own face, just his own face, nothing else. Whatever he most wanted, right now, was standing right here. He checked Quirrell's pulse. Present, weak, irregular. The blistering on his face was severe. Harry stood up and looked at the mirror and looked at the door and made a decision, which was to stay with Quirrell rather than pursue, because the pursuit was tactically sound and also wrong, because Quirrell was a person who was injured and leaving an injured person alone to die was not something Bruce Wayne would do and not something Harry Wayne would do either. He sat down on the floor next to Quirrell and held his wand ready and waited. He didn't wait long. Dumbledore came through the fire room 14 minutes later, moving with a speed that didn't match his age and with an expression that Harry had not seen on his face before, something that was fully, undisguisedly alarmed, the professional composure stripped back by whatever the last 2 hours had been. He stopped when he saw Harry. He looked at Quirrell. Then at the mirror. Then at Harry again, and his blue eyes moved over him in the rapid full-body assessment of someone checking for injuries. "You're unharmed," Dumbledore said. "Yes," Harry said. "The stone, still in the mirror," Harry said. "I didn't want it. So I didn't get it." He paused. "Voldemort tried the killing curse. My wand disrupted it. He possessed Quirrell directly, I disrupted the possession with the Kryptonite field. He separated from Quirrell and left through the door." A pause. "Northeast, I think. Based on the temperature gradient when he moved." Dumbledore stood very still in the doorway. Looking at Harry. Looking at this 11-year-old boy sitting on the floor of a trap room designed for adult dark wizards, wand in hand, uninjured, giving an after-action report. "Harry," Dumbledore said. "He said my mother's protection is still active," Harry said. "The burning on Quirrell's skin, I touched him to disrupt the possession and my skin burned his. He said it was her sacrifice. He looked at his own hands. I didn't hurt him intentionally." "I know," Dumbledore said. He crossed the room and crouched beside Quirrell, checking him with the rapid diagnostic movements of someone who knew their healing magic. "He will need the hospital wing." He looked up at Harry. "Will you help me carry him?" They carried Quirrell out together, through the fire and the potion logic and the chessboard. Harry noted the chess pieces had returned to their original positions, and the rook that Ron had occupied was upright and unbroken, which meant the room reset after the attempt, and through the snare chamber and up through the trapdoor. Harry did his share of the carrying without being asked twice, because Quirrell was a person who had been used and had made bad choices and was now hurt, and none of that was Harry's fault, but carrying him was still the right thing to do. In the hospital wing, Madame Pomfrey took over with the efficient authority of a woman who does not need dramatic situations explained to her, just patients delivered. Dumbledore sent Harry to sit in the corridor with a look that communicated both "stay there" and "well done" simultaneously and went back in. Harry sat in the corridor. He put his back against the wall, knees up, wand across his knees, and he sat there and felt the adrenaline moving through him in its slow tide, which was what happened after something that had required everything and was over now. His hands were completely steady. He noticed this and found it neither surprising nor remarkable. It was just true. Ron appeared at the end of the corridor at a controlled run, which meant Hermione had found him and he'd been going to find Harry. He arrived out of breath with his face carrying the expression of someone who has been trying very hard not to worry and has been failing at it. "You're here," Ron said. "Here," Harry confirmed. Ron slid down the wall to sit beside him. They sat in the hospital corridor in the way of people who don't need to fill silence with sound. After a minute Ron said, "Did you get him?" "Not permanently," Harry said. "Not yet. But he's gone for now." Ron nodded. A pause. "Was it scary?" Harry thought about it. "The killing curse was interesting to watch come apart," he said. "The possession disruption, that was, yes. That was something." He paused. "Less scary than I expected. More real than anything I've ever done." Ron was quiet for a moment. "My dad's going to want to hear all of it." "Your dad can hear all of it," Harry said. "My mum's going to want to meet you," Ron said. "Properly. She already does, actually, but now she's really going to want to." "I'd like that," Harry said, and meant it. Hermione arrived 90 seconds after Ron, arriving at the same controlled run and the same badly managed not worrying face, and she sat on Harry's other side and looked at him with the sharp, comprehensive look of someone taking inventory. "You're fine," she said. "I'm fine," he agreed. "The stone? Secure. Voldemort? Gone. Temporarily." She nodded. Then she put her head back against the wall and looked at the ceiling and let out a long slow breath. "I sent the letter," she said. "Your father. 20 minutes ago." "Good," Harry said. "He's going to come here," she said. "I know. And then he's going to talk to Dumbledore," she said, and that conversation is going to be something I would genuinely like to be present for." "You probably won't be," Harry said. "I know," she said. Still. They sat there, the three of them in the corridor, and the castle moved around them with the ordinary rhythm of its nighttime self, a ghost drifting at the far end of the corridor, the sound of something distant and untroubling, the torchlight doing what torchlight does. Harry looked at his hands, then at his wand, then at the ceiling. He thought, "I knew what I was doing. I did what I was supposed to do. Everyone is alive." He thought, "He's not gone. He'll come back." He thought, "Good. I'll be here." Bruce arrived at Hogwarts at 7 the next morning. He came through the main gates at a walk, which was the pace of someone who had covered the distance from London through every channel available as fast as possible and had arrived and was now containing the arrival energy under the controlled exterior that was just how Bruce Wayne moved through the world. He was wearing a coat over a dark suit and he looked like what he was, a man with serious resources and the focused intent of someone who had received a letter about his child and had not slept. Harry was at the gates. He'd been there since 6:30, because he'd expected Bruce by 7 and he wanted to meet him at the gates rather than in the castle, in the open rather than in an office, which was something about how he wanted this first moment to go. Bruce walked through the gates and Harry walked toward him and they met in the middle of the path and Bruce put both hands on Harry's shoulders and looked at him in the way of someone who is counting things, injuries, expressions, the quality of presence, and what he found apparently satisfied the count because he let out a long slow breath and didn't quite say anything. "I'm fine," Harry said. "I can see that," Bruce said. His voice was steady. His hands on Harry's shoulders were very slightly not. "The disruption worked on the killing curse," Harry said. "The possession disruption worked the way Lucius's model predicted. The protection transferred through touch." He paused. "I stayed with Quirrell. He needed someone to stay with him." Bruce looked at him. He looked at him for a long time, in the way he sometimes looked at Harry that wasn't tactical or analytical but was something else entirely, something he didn't have a word for in the professional vocabulary he'd built for himself and that he didn't need a word for because Harry had understood it for years without one. "I was going to run through every decision you made," Bruce said. "I know," Harry said. "I'm going to have to not do that," Bruce said. "Also no," Harry said. Bruce was quiet for a moment. "You made the right calls," he said. "Every one of them. I've read Hermione's letter, it's thorough, well observed, accurate." A pause. "She's remarkable." "She really is," Harry agreed. "So is Ron," Bruce said. "The chess board. Staying put, sending you ahead. Not trying to be the hero. He paused. "That's good judgment under pressure. Keep those two." "Planning to," Harry said. Bruce looked up at the castle. He looked at it for a moment with his operational expression, assessing, measuring, finding gaps and strengths. Then he looked back at Harry. "Dumbledore," he said. "I want an hour with him." "He's expecting you," Harry said. "McGonagall will take you up." He paused. "He respects you." "I know," Bruce said, with the neutral certainty of someone who has read Dumbledore's letters and drawn conclusions. "He's going to tell you things he hasn't told me yet," Harry said. "About the Horcruxes. About the full scope of it." He met Bruce's eyes. "Tell me everything he tells you." Bruce looked at him. Something moved across his face, the old reflex, the one that said you're a child and this is too much for a child, and something else behind it that had been growing for years, the recognition that Harry was also the person who had just sat on a floor next to an injured man after disrupting a killing curse, and both of those things were simultaneously true. "Everything," Bruce said. "Promise." "I promise," Bruce said, and Harry believed him completely. They walked up the path toward the castle together, and the morning was grey and cool and Scottish, and the castle received them with the calm permanence of something that has stood through considerable history and expects to stand through considerably more, and Harry walked at Bruce's side and felt the weight of the last day settle into its correct proportion in his mind, important, real, formative, over. The next thing was already taking shape. He had a year of intelligence gathered. He had Dumbledore's trust and Snape's grudging respect and Hermione's analysis and Ron's loyalty and Neville's steadiness. He had a suit in his trunk and a wand in his pocket and a father walking beside him. He was ready for whatever came next. He'd been ready since he was 11 years old in a boat crossing a lake, looking at a castle in the dark.